The ruffian son of a high-ranking noble family, he once ruled the academy like a king. But now, he receives a letter from his family informing him that he has been removed from the family register. Reading it, he says he feels like the gods themselves are ridiculing him. His name is Ed Roth Taylor, and his life is over, as we see him thrown out of his house with only his basic belongings. The students comment on his disownment, and after emptying his dorm, everyone assumes they won't see him next semester, especially after he rigged the entrance exams. But Ed thinks it's unfair. Because the arrogant Ed Roth Taylor they're talking about isn't him. He somehow entered a game set in the Magic Academy, Sylvania Academy, his favorite game, the failed swordsman of Sylvania. Usually, when you enter a game, you either possess the first son of a chaebol, a genius ruffian clan master, or an SSS rank hunter who breaks the rules. Yet somehow, he became a third-rate villain who gets kicked from the dorms at the game's beginning, getting the worst character at the worst timing. He screams that it's unfair, claiming he always lived a simple, frugal life without greed. Hearing that, the students call him a scumbag for complaining after everything he's done. So he quickly sits back down and stays quiet. Looking at himself in the mirror, we see his stats, revealing why he has such terrible starting abilities. Despite attending a magic academy, his intelligence is crawling on the floor, while his stamina is pathetic even for a noble. He was originally a third-rate villain who appeared early in the game, and even his memories of Ed are basically a blur. He suddenly remembers what happened to him later. In the corner of the ending credits, Ed was shown begging like a damn bum, which doesn't surprise him, since a ruffian who knew nothing about the world was thrown onto the streets, and the fact that he survived was already lucky. But he still wonders why it was him, why he possessed this body, and has no way to find out. Still, he decides this won't be his ending, and he'll make it no matter what. Rather than a school, the academy is closer to a city, with the entire Arkan Mountains serving as its grounds. And right now, he's in the northeast, deep in the academy's undeveloped forest. He was trying to escape the students' prying eyes and ended up walking for half a day. It was more than enough time to understand his situation. Ed was only at the very beginning of the scenario when he got disowned, but fortunately, he hadn't been expelled from the academy yet, which is extremely important because Sylvania Academy is a top-tier institution. As long as he graduates, his future is secure, and while the game remains set in the academy, he can fully use the knowledge of a 5-time dedicated player. Meaning, if he can quietly graduate, he can live a far more comfortable and awesome life than before. So, his goal is simple: graduation. The problem is the enormous tuition, but this semester should already be paid for. If he can get a scholarship for the next semester, though he isn't sure his terrible stats will qualify him. Regardless, he'll worry about that later, because first, he needs food, clothing, and shelter. He wonders how he'll avoid becoming a bum over the next week, though at least he has enough clothes for now. As for food and shelter, he has nowhere to sleep, nothing to eat tonight, can't get a job because of his reputation, and can't return to the dorms. So for now, he's stuck in the woods, though thankfully, there's a stream nearby. With 10 days until school starts, he plans to make himself fit enough to return. A bit later, we see him using Windblade to chop wood. Yet somehow, cutting just 15 trunks leaves him completely exhausted, making him realize the spell isn't very useful. He's also starving, complaining that they should have at least fed him before throwing him out. Suddenly, he remembers his grandfather saying he used to eat tree bark in the back mountains. So, he boils some with ignition, deciding that anything edible will do. Looking closely, he thinks it almost resembles chicken breast. But the moment he eats it, he regrets everything. Fast forward to day 3, and Ed has practically shrunk from hunger, telling his grandfather that he hates him. After starving for a day and vomiting for 2, he concludes that wood should be used for building. First, he needs to raise the frame that will support the wood. But with only 2 hands and 4 supports, it's far from easy. Still, he gets back up and quickly ties them together from above. And with that, he finally completes the shelter's frame, though there's still a long way to go. Since he can't sleep on bare ground, he lays down his clothes, knowing it's wasteful but having no choice. Night falls, another day passes, and Ed keeps working, until he finally finishes his small tree shelter. And with it, he gains some skills and levels for building. He notices the crafting system's pop-ups are still exactly like the game. He remembers that although Ed never knew it as a noble, he was actually more talented with his hands than with magic. And right now, that handiness skill is exactly what he needs. A bit later, he uses it to create a simple harpoon, because he's determined to get himself a proper meal. After 2 days without food and all that physical labor, he shouldn't even be able to move, but desperation keeps him going. Spotting fish in the water and craving meat, he quickly uses ignition. And finally, he gets a proper meal. Now there's only a week left until school starts, and if he can survive like this until then, he should make it through school without much trouble. But before he takes his first bite, someone calls out to him, making him realize he was so focused on surviving that he forgot something important. The main characters, that is, as we see a girl recognize him. Of all people, he never expected to run into her here, especially after she once told Ed he had no remorse and should disappear from the academy. And that girl is Princess Phinia, who asks Ed if he still hasn't left, the same person who kicked Ed Roth-Taylor out of the dorms. Ed Roth-Taylor is a villain who appears right at the start of the game, using his noble status to hit on the MC's childhood friend, only to get his ass kicked. But he doesn't stop there, and with a vengeful heart, he maliciously tampers with the MC's entrance exam for Sylvania Academy. Unfortunately for him, he is caught by a girl taking the entrance exam while hiding her identity. Phinia Elias Kloll, the third princess of the Kloll Empire, Princess Phinia. She activates her insight, allowing her to detect her target's lies and conspiracies. Ed Roth-Taylor is caught in a pathetic state, gritting his teeth and making excuses, but every single one of his lies is exposed by Phinia's insight. He is then chased out of the dorms, and everyone at the academy comes to hate him. But now, he has met the one person he should have avoided the most, as Phinia asks what he is doing here. She wonders if he is trying to claim the academy isn't expelling him, and Ed nervously explains that he is still a student, but was chased out of the dorms. Keeping her words short, Phinia tells Ed to leave, saying she can't stand seeing a shameless person like him on school grounds, and plans to personally request his expulsion from the academic department. All for committing a dishonorable act as an academy student. And while she keeps nagging him, our poor MC is more worried about his fish burning after starving for 3 days. Though the burning fish is a problem, right now he has a much bigger life crisis. Because the person standing before him, Princess Phinia, really has the authority to get him expelled. So Ed decides to do something, changing his expression as he tells Phinia that the sun will set soon. So aren't royals usually heavily guarded? Then, with an evil smile, he points out how strange it is for a noble princess to come alone to such an isolated forest. But Phinia warns him that if he's threatening her just because she has no escorts, he will regret it. Ed asks what she means by threatening her. He kneels down and explains that he is simply trying to thank the princess. Confused, Phinia activates her insight again, and it confirms that Ed is actually telling the truth, surprising her, while Ed notices her reaction as well. The Roth-Taylor family is famous and influential, but they exploit citizens and conduct human experiments in their research into eternal life. To Ed, it's a trash family destined to be destroyed, with its members eventually imprisoned or executed, but fortunately, he has already been disowned. Meanwhile, his fish is now completely burned, though he still considers it better than starving to death. Getting back to the main issue, Ed realizes that being kicked out was actually a good thing in the long run, so he needs to convince Phinia without lying. Otherwise, getting expelled would mean game over for him. Looking at the timeline, Ed should have been expelled around now, roughly a week before school starts, so he wonders why the princess is here. He gets up and tells Phinia that since she's here without an escort and wearing simple clothes, she must be taking the class placement test. Professor Glass's class placement test, where students have to find magic beads hidden throughout the forest. Ed tells her that Professor Glass's test is notoriously vicious, and if she's taking it, she must be aiming for the best class, Class A. But Phinia asks if he's trying to flatter her, and says he hasn't changed at all. Just as she says she'll request his expulsion, Ed tells her that without his help, she'll never make Class A, and if he's lying, she can have him expelled. Following Ed's instructions, Phinia heads to a lake in the southeast of the forest. There, she finds a small grassy island with a giant tree in the middle, known as Marilda's guardian tree. And beneath it, she finds the present Ed told her about. She remembers that the Ed Roth-Taylor from 3 days ago was definitely a liar and a charlatan, and she still vividly remembers his pathetic state. But the Ed Roth-Taylor she just met is completely different. Fast forward, and the class placement test has officially ended. Professor Glass tells everyone to take out the beads they found. As the students do so, he assigns them to Class F, explaining that the examiner's intent matters, because the test wasn't simply about finding magic beads. Only those who found beads with unusually low magical power could make Class A, and only 3 students managed to find them: Zix and Lortel. And finally, the student who found a bead beneath Marilda's guardian tree, which had unusually low magical power. Those 3 will be at the top of the class. Back with Ed, his fish is completely burned and he no longer has the strength to use his spear. So, he makes himself a crude fishing rod instead. While thinking about Phinia, the third princess of the empire, Phinia Elias Kloll, who has seen through flattery and sophistry since childhood. That sharpened her insight and eventually created her innate skill, making it impossible for anyone to escape her insight. Because of that, Ed had no choice but to give her authentic information, but that creates an even bigger problem. The proud Princess Phinia is eventually known as the Princess of Love, and after failing the class placement test and falling into Class F, she was supposed to begin changing. But she has enormous influence over the early scenario, and now she finds the golden bead and enters Class A, which causes the original story's scenario to collapse. So even if Ed manages to avoid expulsion, all the information he knows could become useless, and he'd be finished. But of course, the top of the class is still Lucy Merrill. So perhaps the future hasn't changed completely yet. Phinia recalls what happened and realizes Ed didn't lie to her. There really was a bead. But this wasn't a present. The reason Princess Phinia hid her identity in the first place was because she was embarrassed by the special treatment she'd receive if people knew who she was. She wanted to prove herself, and she knew from seeing the bead that it would give her the best result on the test, but she couldn't take it. Because finding it wouldn't be something she accomplished on her own, and the title of Princess of Love that she would eventually receive isn't a skill or a stat, but a title earned by walking the righteous path. Ed simply threw bait in front of the princess. Whether it was a lie or the truth probably didn't matter, because the princess could always discern which one it was. Even if Ed genuinely believed she would fail the test, Phinia was confident she would succeed and rub it in his face. Yet Ed didn't lie, and she still failed to enter Class A. So now, the princess can do nothing but say that she'll be keeping an eye on Ed. Back with Ed, we see that he finally catches another fish. Sometime later, Ed runs toward the school, since living in the forest means he has to start running early every morning just to arrive on time. But he finally makes it to Sylvania Academy. Inside the school, the opening ceremony is underway, with students listening while enjoying the prepared food. The other students start commenting on Ed, disgusted that he would even show his face after everything he did, and Ed hears those sweet whispers welcoming the survivor. But he focuses on eating, calling it the victor's reward, and slowly enjoys every bite. Some students notice that Ed seems different now, and even eats surprisingly well-mannered. As he hears the other students discussing their plans, Ed thinks his goal isn't anything grand. He simply wants to graduate. And just as he wishes for nothing to happen, he catches the attention of a pink-haired girl, who finds it strange that Ed feels like a completely different person. Today is the first day of school at Sylvania. We see the instructor giving a short speech to the students. And on his very first day, Ed almost gets expelled. He didn't expect Phinia to tell the dean about him, but judging by the dean's smile, she apparently didn't say anything bad. Still, he barely avoided expulsion, so he decides to be careful and keep the storyline from straying too far. Life skills honed for survival, along with magic training suitable for a student of the magic faculty. To master both, there is no better weapon than a bow. As his life skills improve and he learns to make better arrows, he can eventually add spirit formulas or magic to them. While hunting a rabbit, he encounters a girl sitting beneath a tree. Seeing her, he thinks spirit formulas are completely beyond his talent, since this girl is apparently a genius spirit sorcerer, Janica Faylover. She notices Ed too and asks if he's the amusing guy Marilda was talking about. She quickly approaches and introduces herself as Janica Faylover, a second-year student like him, telling him to just call her Janica. She then asks if he's surprised that she already knows about him, and answers herself, explaining that this entire forest belongs to Marilda, a high-ranking spirit, so she heard plenty about him, and Ed confirms that the forest master told her about him. Janica says Marilda is quite nosy, always keeping an eye on everything, so it's obvious she'd know about an unwanted visitor. Hearing himself called an unwanted visitor, Ed gets nervous, remembering how many creatures he's killed and how many trees he's cut down. But Janica tells him not to worry about such small things, since creatures naturally hunt and eat each other, and Marilda isn't bothered by it either. Hearing that, Ed comments that even a huge wild wolf has a surprisingly tender heart. Janica chuckles and says that is unexpected, isn't it? She then says there's something she wants to show him, holding out her hands and asking if it isn't adorable, since she signed a contract with him. She asks if he wants to touch him, making Ed wonder if she's talking about a spirit. He thinks that if he wants to become friends with Janica, he needs to respond at the right moment, but he tells Janica that he doesn't know what she means because he can't see spirits. Janica looks a little taken aback, while Ed leaves after confirming it once again. Ed notes that only by following the original storyline can he maintain his informational advantage. Janica Faylover is extremely important to the original storyline, meaning she's someone he must never get close to. As she watches him leave, her expression turns slightly sad. She remembers his comment about the wolf and rubs one of her spirits, telling Marilda that just as she said, he's really an interesting guy. But no matter how much she thinks about it, she really believes he can't see her spirits, making her wonder who exactly he is. She's also a little annoyed that she tried so hard to be kind, only for him to answer with a simple yep and nothing else. Still, she doesn't believe this will be their last meeting. So, she'll simply figure out what kind of person he is from now on. Back with Ed, he notes that the distance between his shelter and the student area is ridiculous. He barely makes it on time by leaving at dawn and running at full speed, and just commuting to school is already increasing his stats. And if he wants to win a scholarship, he'll need to study harder, so he writes notes on a stone slab with a burned stick and borrows books from the student library. On his way home, he washes his sweaty clothes for the next day, and even though you'd think he's done, he isn't. He still has to prepare enough firewood, drinking water, and jerky for tomorrow's lunch, leaving him with only 4 hours of sleep. But that's not what bothers him most, as he finally calls out Janica and asks how long she plans to keep following him. Janica is surprised that he noticed, but Ed says it would have been stranger if he didn't. He tries to scare her away by reminding her who he is, the worst hooligan in existence, Ed Roth-Taylor, and asks why she keeps hanging around him. She replies that she's only following other people's judgment, isn't she? And she doesn't even know him herself yet. Ed remembers that Janica really was that kind of character. She may look naive and dumb on the outside, but she's actually very independent-minded. But knowing what's waiting for her in the future, he can't simply respond with a refreshing smile. Because Janica Failover is the final boss of Act 1. She's the only character who actually smiles at Ed Roth-Taylor, and even though he didn't want to go this far, he tells her that since destiny brought them together, perhaps she could do him a favor, making Janica immediately excited. Ed continues, pointing out that he's clearly a mess, disowned by his family, and currently in a difficult situation. So, he asks if she can lend him some money, promising to pay her back, but the request completely breaks Janica. Every year, Janica receives a scholarship for being top of the class, but it isn't just proof of her excellence. Her family is so poor that without it, she couldn't afford to stay in school. As the daughter of a small ranch, this is Janica's weakness. And the moment money comes up, Janica starts backing away while apologizing to Ed. With that, Ed believes he's successfully cut her out. 3 days later, Ed still doesn't feel good about what he did, but he doesn't want to get entangled with important characters anymore. He plans to stay careful and make sure the story doesn't stray from the original. But when he arrives at his shelter, he notices something inside, causing the basket on his back to fall. Completely shocked, he wonders what the hell is going on, because in terms of importance, this character has an even greater presence than Janica. The subject of admiration for both classmates and professors, the rare genius and most powerful character in the game, Lucy Merrill. Lucy wakes up, leaving Ed wondering why she's sleeping here and what she's even doing in this forest, until she says it's so loud that she can't sleep. When Ed asks what he did, she clarifies that she isn't talking about him. Instead, she points behind Ed, toward a wolf as large as a house, which keeps trying to talk to Ed, leaving him completely shocked. And it's asking Ed to someday save Janica at all costs. But even if she says that, Ed is still unable to see anything. Regardless, just when he thought he had finally gotten rid of Janica, another problem shows up at his shelter, and he wonders why she is sleeping here. She then goes back to sleep, saying that she has already said what she needed to, though Ed tries to stop her. Ed then remembers that she uses space magic to jump from place to place with her tiny body, making her area of activity similar to that of a street cat. She can always teleport to places like the clock tower or rooftops with good views and lighting, where she can nap whenever she wants. And in this case, his camp is in the northern forest of Arkin Island, a remote place where no one ever comes. But for her, it isn't that remote, with its cool breeze and the sound of the river making it the perfect place to nap while skipping class. And that makes Ed realize that he only has himself to blame for this. The next day, he looks up at the sky and sees something coming toward him, making him think that he needs some kind of solution. And it's Lucy, who used multi-casing to combine 5 or 6 high-level spells just to fly here and fall asleep. And Ed realizes it's only a matter of time before the storyline gets ruined if she keeps coming here. We then see him working on more things, while Lucy wakes up and asks if she can have some of his beef jerky, but Ed refuses. But she eats it anyway, annoying Ed as he realizes she won't listen to reason. And since she has already come here twice, she'll probably keep coming back. He needs to find a solution, but despite seeing countless strategy posts, there was never a method for defeating Lucy. However, he does have something, as he tells Lucy that while he was coming here, he saw the Awfulest Hall maid searching for her, and hearing that immediately scares Lucy. So she suddenly remembers something urgent and takes her leave. There was no strategy for defeating her, but there was one sentence in the setup guide that everyone overlooked. It stated that Lucy runs away from the maids who take care of her like a mother every single day. And with that, Ed believes that Lucy Merrill is finally gone. And since she had only been at his camp for 2 days, Ed thinks it shouldn't affect anything, though it doesn't take long for him to realize how complacent that thought was. Now fast forward, and we are at the joint combat training. It's basically a mock one-on-one combat exercise, and to minimize lethality, the combat students use fake weapons. Meanwhile, the magic students are only allowed to use basic elemental magic, while alchemy students are restricted from using overly powerful potions and spirit formulas. The grades are mixed, and the matches are randomly assigned as one-on-one battles. Above all the important characters are taking part in this class. The benevolent princess, Phenia, and the golden daughter, Lortel. The spirit sorcerer, Janica, and the slothful Lucy. And the wicked Clebius. The list could go on forever. But even among them, the most important person is the protagonist, the failed swordsman, Taylor. Ed gets excited when he realizes Taylor's match is coming up. But he already knows the results, so he hasn't been paying much attention to the matches, since almost all the winners are first-year students like the protagonist, Taylor. Except for Janica, who is a second-year student, and she excitedly runs over to greet Ed. Ed is annoyed, wondering how she can happily run up to him after the pathetic experience of him asking her for money. And unlike Lucy, who is like a cat, Janica is more like a dog as she tells Ed that the match list is out. But he tells her that he isn't interested, so Janica asks if he isn't even interested in his own match. Hearing that, Ed is shocked, wondering if he has to fight too. He realizes that Ed in the original storyline had already been expelled by this point, so he wonders who his opponent will be. And it's none other than Princess Phenia. Suddenly, an announcement is made for Lucy and Taylor to prepare for their duel, and Ed immediately stands up in excitement. As Taylor enters the arena, he declares with determination that he will perform to the best of his ability. And for Ed, it doesn't matter who he is fighting right now, because he needs to focus on Taylor. Even though Taylor came from a world beyond the screen, Ed had lived as him for several lifetimes, from miserable and meaningless bad endings to true endings that left lasting impressions. He had completed those routes countless times, and among all those paths, there wasn't a single one that wasn't difficult and filled with hardships. And even though he has already decided to focus on his own life, he will still cheer Taylor on. But when another announcement calls for Lucy to come onto the stage, Ed becomes confused, because he wonders where Lucy went. He looks down and finds a backup podium, where Lucy appears to be sleeping, so Ed goes over and wakes her up. He knows that if the match doesn't happen, he'll be in trouble, since this is an important event that inspires Taylor to pick up the sword for the first time. Lucy tells him that she's hungry and asks if she can have the beef jerky from last time. Ed tells her to finish her duel first. And so, it's Lucy, the first-year student at the top of her class, versus Taylor McClure, the protagonist of this world, born to be a swordsman, who has never held a sword in his life. Yet with his very first swing, he cuts straight through Lucy's lightning-fast magic. The spell she thought would obviously hit is blocked, catching her completely off guard. Taylor takes advantage of the opening and quickly closes the distance. Surprised by this, Lucy strikes him with an intermediate-level lightning spell, and Taylor is overwhelmed by the reflexively cast magic. But Lucy is disqualified for using intermediate-level magic, giving Taylor the honor of becoming the first person to ever defeat Lucy Merrill. And for Ed, it was a legendary scene. And so, the instructors restart the match. Taylor immediately rushes toward Lucy without a weapon, only for her to blast him into the wall behind her. It surprises everyone, while Lucy isn't even fully awake from her sleep. The students around them wonder if it's already over, saying there's no way to beat the top student, and mock Taylor for rushing at a mage barehanded. Ed remembers that Taylor's life was always a series of trials, a country bumpkin and a failed student. An underachiever who hadn't earned a single decent grade since starting school, a failure acknowledged by everyone. And while everyone immediately jumped to conclusions about the match, even in the middle of such despair, Taylor never lost hope as he gets back on his feet. Ed also grins when he sees him, cheering him on in his mind. That shout was from a swordsman who refused to give up on his life until the very end, and it was what touched everyone's hearts. And we see Lucy become surprised by Taylor's attack. Ed thinks that Lucy will use her lightning magic now, but he is surprised instead, as we see Lucy block his attack right before it reaches her. And with her counterattack, Taylor is sent flying, crashing into the ceiling all the way at the top. Lucy had used wind magic instead of lightning magic, something Ed doesn't remember happening. And she is declared the winner, as the entire crowd cheers for her. Meanwhile, Ed is left stunned after seeing Taylor lose. Now we see Taylor walking away from the arena, the spark in his eyes completely gone, as an overwhelming difference in power can feel like being struck by lightning. Ed realizes that this could be really bad, and leaving Taylor alone right now would be the worst option. The Storm's Blessing, a passive magic spell that can be gained by making a contract with Marilda, the high-level wind spirit. Lucy tries asking Ed for that jerky, but Ed ignores her and runs past, remembering that Marilda and Lucy never crossed paths in the original story. And Lucy eventually made a contract with Marilda and became stronger after staying at his camp. Meanwhile, the announcer announces the match between Ed and Princess Phinia. He encounters her on the way, and she tries to ask him about what happened earlier, but he ignores her as well, thinking that Taylor should have won, since he was supposed to pick up the sword and gain a confidence boost. Meanwhile, Phinia is surprised to see Ed acting like this, and Ed blames himself for Taylor losing, because it was his fault for still being at the academy. He calls out to Taylor, thinking that what he is about to do might not change anything, but it's better than doing nothing. Hearing his voice, Taylor stops and looks back, as Ed tries to motivate him with his words in front of everyone. Thinking that if Ed becomes so discouraged that he falls into despair, there is a high chance that he would end up having to go through hell again. And in the end, he tells Taylor not to despair over something so trivial, remembering that there are too many ridiculous events waiting for them at this academy, and Taylor needs to be the one to suffer through them, because Ed definitely doesn't want to. We switch to Phinia, as Emperor Crowell tells her that she was given God's blessing at birth, and he was also the first person to realize that she had the ability to discern lies. But her ability was not actually God-given at all, because her life was a continuous cycle of veiled hostility and hidden schemes. And Phinia developed this ability to discern lies in order to protect herself within that dark abyss. And so, Princess Phinia had complete faith in her own ability. Among the gazes looking up at the princess with apparent respect, there was actually an unmistakable darkness, but even though she could see through all the lies, she spent her life pretending not to notice. We return to the present, as Ed and Phinia are about to begin their duel, with Ed telling her that he is honored to face her in battle. And because of everything she had experienced, she couldn't help but look Ed directly in the eye as she gives him the same response. The other students comment on Ed's behavior toward Taylor, thinking that he is only trying to look good and must have some kind of ulterior motive, since he has always been a terrible person. Princess Phinia agrees with them, believing that he really is a shameful person who used his status to humiliate younger students. And when that failed, he tried to meddle with their exam and was caught red-handed. But at least, she thinks, that was how he used to be, and remembering her recent encounters with him, she wonders if that is really all there is to him. When he followed Taylor earlier, his desperation had been genuine. And now, as their duel begins, Phinia tells Ed that he is a distraction, and she intends to put an end to that with this duel. She uses her water magic, noting that Ed uses wind and fire magic, and she wonders how he will block her attacks, planning to exchange blows with him until he finally lets go of whatever distracting thoughts are on his mind. By the time their intense battle is over, she should be able to see through his mysterious motives, but Ed doesn't even counter and instead takes the attack, leaving her completely dumbfounded as Ed simply crashes onto the ground and immediately admits defeat, shocking Phinia. She knew that he could see where her water attack was headed, yet he still chose not to block it. Meanwhile, the other students in the stands begin mocking him, saying he was acting tough only to go down in one hit. But regardless, he bows before her and says that he learned a lot from the battle, and just as she is about to ask him something, she suddenly realizes that throughout the entire time, ever since he stepped onto the stage, he hadn't even looked her in the eyes once, realizing that he had never been interested in fighting her at all. After the duel, Ed quickly rushes away, thinking that whenever he encounters Princess Phinia, the key is to act in a way that won't affect the main story, because she is an incredibly important character in the game. But the person who matters even more is Taylor, the protagonist of this world. He frantically searches for him, wondering where he went. But suddenly, someone calls out to him, making Ed glance back. And it's Phinia, panting heavily as she chases after him, with Ed telling her that she shouldn't have come all the way here without her guards. But she angrily asks what is wrong with him, and Ed replies that he has no idea what she is talking about, only for her to bring up the duel and angrily state that he had no interest in fighting at all, since all he wanted was to get off the stage as quickly as possible. She starts venting about how her workload from all her classes is already huge. The merchant girl keeps trying to take over the academy, Professor Glast is as ill-tempered as ever, and the staff keep going on about imperial laws. She finally blows up, saying that she already has so much on her mind. Yet Ed keeps distracting her like this, making him realize that he never expected her life to be this complicated. Ed grabs her shoulder and tells her to calm down, saying there is no need to get so agitated. He tells her to take some deep breaths, which she does. She then blushes and becomes embarrassed, telling Ed to forget what just happened. Meanwhile, Ed wonders if he can leave now, but Phineas continues, admitting that she has a bad habit of asking people directly about her suspicions instead of constantly trying to uncover their true motives and jumping to conclusions. Though she admits that it is probably because she grew up in such an environment, while Ed desperately wants her to let him go because he needs to find Taylor. And Phineas tells Ed that she won't beat around the bush with him anymore. She states that he deliberately tried to get disowned by his family because he knew they had a dark side, and that he bullied Taylor because he needed a good enough reason to be disowned. Ed notes that it is a sharp deduction, though half of it is wrong, but it is true that his family has a dark side. But he acts oblivious, claiming that he knows nothing about it, thinking that it is something she needs to discover by investigating in the future. But Phineas doesn't believe him, since his behavior right now doesn't make sense, asking why he tried to cheer Taylor up earlier if he truly had no ill will toward him. Ed calls it a good question, but regardless, he lies that he thought cheering Taylor up would make people see him differently, and Phineas immediately calls it a lie. He keeps trying to make the same argument, but her insight continues detecting everything as a lie, making Phineas increasingly annoyed. Ed can say all this because he knows she has no proof yet, and the only advantage he has in this world is knowing the story, so he must not change anything. And so, Phineas agrees, saying that she has no proof right now and cannot refute him, before giving him permission to leave. Since she noticed that he had been staring at the door the entire time, she knows he must be in a hurry. And so, Ed starts leaving while thanking her, noting that he has never seen her like this before. Considering how much influence she has over the first half of the game, and how many characters and incidents she becomes involved with. Perhaps Ed being added to the story was simply the final thing that broke her back, and while there isn't much he can do for her, he turns back and tells her that whatever burdens he carries cannot be heavier than the weight she must be carrying. So, while it may be presumptuous of him to say this, she looks exhausted, and although paying attention to politics and everything else is important, she should try taking it easy. This isn't the Imperial Court where she has to be constantly on her toes. It's Sylvania Academy. Phineas had spent her entire life constantly seeing through other people's lies, but this was the first time someone had seen through her own facade. Fast forward, and Ed is still searching for Taylor. And he finally finds him sitting on a bench, but as he wonders what he should say to him, a girl suddenly steps forward, telling Ed not to come any closer, and tells him to stop bullying Taylor already, as this girl is none other than Triss, the main female lead of the game. Taylor also stands up, commenting on whether Ed is still at the academy. Ed realizes that Taylor has already recovered, his fighting spirit refusing to give in no matter what. While he was dealing with the princess, Taylor's childhood friend and biggest supporter, Triss, must have gone to him without hesitation, as we see her cheering Taylor up and motivating him to do better and never give up. Taylor asks Ed what business he has with him, while Ed thinks that as long as he is Ayla, Taylor will get back on his feet as many times as necessary. And so, Ed compliments him on his swordsmanship, but Taylor asks what he is playing at. Ed thinks that he has played this game countless times and experienced Taylor's side of the story over and over, so he should be more honest with himself as he turns back and tells Taylor that it is nothing like that. Ed thought he could simply leave saving the world to him and focus on his own survival, taking Taylor for granted simply because he was the main character. But now, he is relieved, not because things have returned to how they were in the original story, but because Taylor, whom he had spent so much time as, is doing well. And that alone is enough for him. Though Ed acting all cool disgusts both of them, and Ed thinks he can't really blame them for reacting that way. Suddenly, as Ed is walking back, he hears a loud explosion, and we see a huge pillar of flame rising into the sky, making Ed comment that it is already that time. It is a scene they should be watching from the audience seats with everyone else. The duel between Lordle, the Golden Daughter, and Yennecar, the Elementalist. While it may be a little different from how things were supposed to happen, Ed is sure that Taylor and Ayla are watching it as well, as this is one of the many hardships that Taylor will have to overcome, since she is the final boss of the first act. Jenica Feylover. After winning her duel, everyone surrounds her and congratulates her, showering her with praise and compliments. And she thanks everyone for it, until she suddenly hears the medics asking everyone to make way for the patient. And she sees Lordle badly injured from their duel, which causes her to become frightened and shocked. With Taylor losing to Lucy unlike in the original story, the center of attention during joint combat training ended up becoming Jenica for upholding the pride of the older students. She already had many friends to begin with, but it looks like she will become surrounded by even more as a result of this. Though Ed thinks that it might be for the best, and regardless, He believes he won't be seeing her at his camp anytime soon. Since getting involved with the main character's storyline only complicates things, and now, it has already been 2 weeks since the joint training. Without interference from the main characters, he has been able to focus on his own survival, and he can now get enough food using his fishing net. And he also feels like he has gained some muscle from raising his strength stat. But the standard for high stats is getting them up to 10, so he can't afford to become complacent yet. We then see Janica once again watching Ed from a bush and blushing when she sees him naked, asking if he likes walking around half-naked, while Ed replies that she is the one who popped out of nowhere. At the campfire, he asks her why she came here, and she replies that it feels like her secret hideout, so coming here always feels like an adventure to her. And she also wanted to talk some more and get some advice from him. Though Ed wonders why she chose him out of everyone at the academy. She explains that he left early, so he might not have seen it, but during the joint combat training, she injured someone. But Ed knows it was because her opponent used intermediate-level magic first, though that doesn't matter to Janica, because she is kind-hearted by nature. She continues that no matter how hard she tries to get over it, she keeps wondering if she went too far, and those doubts have been keeping her awake. She then asks Ed if she should apologize to her, but whenever she tries, her friends stop her, saying that the other person was the one who did something wrong first. But Ed tells her to do it if she thinks it is the right thing to do. She is quite surprised to hear that, because Janica is a student treasured by everyone. So whenever she starts feeling guilty or blaming herself, everyone immediately takes her side. But Janica knows that while it is nice having her friends support her, it doesn't remove the responsibility she ought to take for her own actions. Which is probably why she came to Ed for advice, as she tells him that she knew he was different. Because he never simply takes her side without questioning things. And Ed replies that if it bothers her, then that's too bad. But she quickly declines, saying that isn't what she meant. It doesn't bother her at all, as she thinks that Ed wasn't like this last year. While Janica always seemed carefree, she noticed things too, and even when Ed asked her for money, he didn't seem desperate enough, as he had clearly been trying to put some distance between them. Janica finds his opinion quite relieving, as she smiles and says that she wishes everyone in the world were more like him, and watching Ed act this way gives her a strange sense of peace. Now, on the next day, Ed seems quite nervous and thinks that he is in trouble. Sylvania's failed swordsman may have been praised as a masterpiece, but very few players ever reached the true ending, and newbies in particular were faced with various bad endings right from the beginning. For example, if you save a girl being attacked during the class assignment exam, you discover the Golden Daughter's secret. She then sends someone to kidnap Taylor, leading to bad ending 3. And if instead of choosing Taylor's childhood friend Ayla during the extermination training, you get paired with the Golden Daughter, you reach another bad ending, as Taylor is supposed to save Ayla from falling off a cliff. And if you protect the Golden Daughter from Taken, the fire spirit summoned by Janica, Taylor gets burned to death. And we see someone calling out to Ed, while he thinks that he needs to get away from this girl. He then asks her how long she plans to keep following him, and she replies that she didn't expect him to be so intent on ignoring her, while Ed thinks that of course he is intent on ignoring her. She is one of the 4 female leads of Sylvania's failed swordsman, the only child of the business mogul Elt Cahelland, Lordal Cahelland, the Golden Daughter. Also known as the newbie Shredder, as she tells Ed that she would like to purchase 2 hours of his time while grinning. Unlike the other main female characters, Lortel Cahelland's route is hidden. And unlike Penia, she is treated as a villain from the beginning, with her true nature only being revealed in the latter half of the game. And as soon as you understand Lortel's pain and struggles as a realist, the player is forced to choose between Penia and Lortel, and while Ed is monologuing about all this, Lortel tries to call out to him. But he completely ignores her, knowing that he cannot let that silver tongue win him over right now, because if he follows her intentions, he will end up being controlled by her. But she refuses to let him ignore her, asking him to listen just once and saying that she would like to help him a little, but he tells her not to say things she doesn't mean, and Lortel replies that she was simply trying to show him how much respect she has for him. She then steps in front of him, stating that she is genuinely moved by his strong will, finding it impressive that he still wishes to continue studying despite being faced with such a harsh environment. Though it's not like she hasn't heard the rumors about him being cocky and self-centered, but to her, it doesn't matter, as she laughs and says. She asks him to listen to her offer, starting with 3 gold coins, saying that she heard he has become quite close with Janica recently, so she would like him to help her befriend Janica. And according to Ed, the amount she is offering is enough money for some hardworking people to live on for an entire month. But he gets right up in her face and tries to take a jab at her for using her wealth as the Golden Daughter to make connections. But she slips the money into his pocket, telling him to hold on to it for now, as she is well aware that the more people she has on her side, the better. Ed realizes that Lortel already has a hunch about what might happen in the future. She will eventually get into a political battle with Princess Peenia over control of the academy, meaning she needs to start building alliances now. And so, Ed smirks and reaches out to shake Lortel's hand. Lortel also smirks, thinking that those who grow up in abundance can become weak-willed after just one moment of misfortune. And what works best against people who have been pushed to the edge is something as simple as a single coin. Because she believes they would sell their families for the sake of one gold coin, sacrificing their pride and even themselves for money. Therefore, taking control of someone that desperate should be incredibly simple. But unfortunately, it didn't work, causing her to turn back toward Ed and smile, calling him interesting. Meanwhile, Ed grits his teeth, thinking that if he had accepted the money, he would have been much better off. It's a shame, but if he were to put the newbie crusher together with Janica, there is no telling what new horrors would await him, so he needs to avoid anything that could change the main story. Now, later that same night, Lortel isn't insulted at all by Ed's rejection, as we see her greeting Janica at night, saying that it's a fancy meeting her here, while Janica replies that Lortel looks so different with her hair down. For the business-minded Lortel, who always considers gains and losses as well as the pros and cons, Ed's rejection only fuels her desire to bring Janica over to her side. She claims she is here to apologize for using intermediate magic during their duel, explaining that she simply wanted to see how strong the top student of the second-year class really was. And upon noticing her wounds, Janica expresses her concern, while Lortel replies that she did have to pay a high price for what she did. She tells Janica not to worry, as the wounds will heal soon, while Lortel thinks that perhaps she can influence her more easily by playing on her guilt, since she seems a lot like a protagonist from a fairy tale. Suddenly, Janica tells Lortel that it seems her conversation with Ed didn't work out. This surprises Lortel, as Janica smiles and says that she was going to respect her privacy. But many of her spirits are quite chatty. They tell her almost everything that happens around the northern forest. Lortel starts sweating nervously and asks if that means she knows about it. Janica gets closer to her and says that sincerity cannot be bought with money, and she thinks what Ed did was much more touching. She then starts acting goofy again, apologizing for sounding too arrogant and saying that she has never been someone's upperclassman before, so it's a little embarrassing, while Lortel decides to reevaluate her opinion of her. Janica starts to leave, saying that she has a lot to prepare for before making a contract with a high-ranking spirit, and since more people are cheering her on, she has to do her best for them. And Lortel realizes that she was wrong to call Janica a fairy tale protagonist, and that her assumption that Janica was ignorant of the world was wrong as well. Janica then calls out to Lortel and apologizes for injuring her so badly that day, and wishes for her to get better soon, while Lortel notes that she is someone who maintains such a cheerful attitude despite knowing all the darkness the world holds. And so, Lortel realizes that Janica is difficult to handle. But Lortel also notices that Janica seemed a little off just now. Inside her room, Janica tells herself to do her best, saying that everyone expecting great things from her is actually a good thing. Fast forward to morning, and we hear Lucy sweating and saying that she smells something. She quickly flies off afterward, dirtying all of Ed's laundry again. Ed glances to the side as someone asks who is there, and we see that it's the senior maid of Awfulus Hall, Sylvania Academy's grandest dormitory, Belle Maya. She is also the maid who kicked Ed out, so Ed tries to explain himself, while Maya comments that she already knew he was living here because Lady Janica often talks about him, though she didn't expect him to be living like this. But regardless, she expresses that she is glad to see such a positive change in him. For Ed, however, it's difficult to listen to what Belle Maya is saying because his eyes keep getting drawn towards something else. The maids of Awfulus Hall are an elite group who perform every household task to perfection for the students, including cooking. And the contents of Maya's basket must be the finest ingredients an elite maid like her could personally gather from the forest. In other words, high-level foraging knowledge that cannot simply be found in books, as Maya tells Ed not to be so formal with her, telling him to treat her poorly like he did back at the hall, but Ed refuses to do so. She is surprised to hear that, as Ed tries to butter her up, saying that he can't treat her poorly when she works so hard, while remembering that there is no scene in the game involving Belle Maya, which means that he can get acquainted with an extra like her without causing any problems, so he starts asking about the contents of her basket. And Maya tells him all about the various edible fruits, mushrooms, and herbs. And since Ed has also created a fishing net for fish farming, he now has plenty of meat and fish, meaning he is pretty much set. And even though he only knows 2 basic spells, using them over and over has allowed him to level them up to 10. He has also started making herbal tea and using those spells for cutting wood and cooking, greatly increasing his survival efficiency. It's obvious from the fact that even though he has finished all his tasks, the sun still hasn't set yet. And he has even started to enjoy this lifestyle. But then, he notices something shining brightly in the sky, and that something comes crashing down onto his tent at incredible speed. The impact sends Ed flying as well. He wonders what on earth they did to his shelter. And as the smoke clears, we see that it's Lucy, who says that she almost died just now. Hearing her say that, Ed asks, by whom? Since she is supposed to be the strongest mage in the world. But Lucy shudders in fear and replies that it was Belle Maya, though Ed only knows her as a kind and good person. Lucy says that all she did was skip class like usual, but Maya suddenly became furious and started walking toward her with her fist clenched tighter than usual, and Lucy doesn't know why, but Maya seems to be worried about someone. It happened so suddenly that Lucy escaped using teleportation magic before she even knew what was happening, and judging by that fist, it looked like it would really hurt. Ed starts getting pissed, wondering what kind of ordeals Belle Maya has to deal with, and when Lucy asks if she can have some of his beef jerky, Ed smacks her on the head, saying that she just blew all of it away. Lucy lets out a soft, ouch, and Ed notices that her magic barrier didn't activate. She tells Ed that she has completely run out of mana. Hearing that, Ed gets up to hit her again, with the first flick being for destroying his shelter, and the second one being for the benevolent Belle Maya. Fast forward, and Ed realizes that he needs a sturdier house, and for that, he will have to build one out of proper lumber. And since someone who has to use every moment of the day wisely cannot afford to waste time, he decides to get all the information he needs from the library in one go, having already found the architectural design, and now needing to learn how to prepare the lumber and build the roof. A girl then walks up to him, telling him that it's time to close the library, and comments that he has been studying really hard, causing him to apologize for staying so late. She tells him that it's all right, since seeing him so focused actually inspires her to study as well, and introduces herself as Elka Island. Seeing her expression, Ed realizes that she really wants him to introduce himself as well. And when he tells her his name, she looks terrified at first, but Ed is already used to that reaction, knowing that his bad reputation shows no sign of fading, though he is too busy to do anything about it anyway. But to his surprise, Elka says that he is completely different from the rumors. She says that he is reading through those elemental books that she finds difficult to understand in a matter of days, and he even managed to read 6 of them just today. She used to hear that he was a beggar, but she smiles and says that rumors really are unreliable. She also tells him that she knows someone else who works incredibly hard, so she will be rooting for him, and Ed thanks her for that. But just as she is leaving, everything suddenly begins to rumble, making Ed wonder what is happening. Elka finds herself standing between 2 massive bookshelves, and they suddenly begin falling toward her. And with that, the final chapter of Act 1 begins, as the battle against Glasscan is about to start. Now at 11:30, a temporary post has been set up in front of the student halls, and thanks to Taylor, quite a few students have managed to make it there. 2 hours have passed since the disaster began, and one of the girls says that she has read about something like this in a book. It's a magic circle designed to summon Glasscan, the highest-ranking spirit of darkness. Peenia calls it terrible news, saying that there is only one person with enough spirit sense to summon such a powerful spirit. And so, it is very likely that their enemy is the second-year top student, Janica Failover, whose power has gone out of control because of the spirit of darkness. Taylor speaks up, saying that they have no time to waste, because if Ayla is right, the barrier surrounding the Academy wing is only buying them time, and once Glasscan is summoned, there will be countless casualties, so they need to get inside the student halls. Claire, the captain of the Imperial Guard, says that the guards outside will soon notice what is happening, and if they and the professors can get through the barrier, everything should be resolved quickly. But Elvira Aniston explains that if a high-ranking spirit created the barrier, it will be extremely strong, meaning they will have to deal with it from the inside. And if everyone works together, she believes they have a chance. Clevius is terrified and completely against the idea, asking if they seriously expect them to get past all those mid-ranking spirits and beasts before infiltrating the building and taking down Janica. And there are even high-ranking spirits, 2 of them at that, Takin and Velisper, and both of them have already gone berserk. Clevius considers it nothing short of suicide and refuses to go. Lortel asks if Peenia is really sure that Janica did all of this by herself, because even though she is the top student of her year, manifesting Glasscan and several high-ranking spirits at the same time should be far beyond her limits. Ayla says that it is most likely Velisper's power, and that Janica must be nothing more than a medium. Dark spirits are the natural enemies of elementalists, and they are incredibly powerful, which is why elementalists cannot normally control them, as they are more like demons that seek to control the elementalist instead, meaning an elementalist must keep their heart pure or risk being consumed. So the question is, how did Velisper manage to take control of Janica, someone who is so skilled at summoning magic? Ziggs speaks up, saying that none of that matters right now, and they need to decide what to do next, either waiting for the professors to arrive or acting on their own. And according to him, Princess Peenia should be the one making that decision. Everyone waits for her answer, and in that moment, she suddenly remembers something Ed told her in passing. The time when Ed told her that she should try taking it easy. She thinks it would be nice if she could actually do that, and then tells everyone that they will enter the building in 1 hour. But only she, her knight Claire, the top students from each year, and the students from Class A will go, limiting the group to those who have already proven their capabilities. She also decides to take full responsibility for whatever happens. Then, one of the students comes rushing in, saying that they have determined how many students remain in each building, and both Audrey Hall and the Magic Potion Depository are under siege, meaning those students cannot join them. And so, Peenia realizes that they are the only ones who can act right now, as the student says that they don't know of anyone else who can help. But a purple-haired girl suddenly shouts that they do, saying that her apprentice librarian and a second-year student are still inside the student library, so Peenia asks for their names. She replies that they are Elka Island, which shocks Ziggs, as the girl explains that they were learning how to take care of the magic books there. Ziggs immediately tries to leave to save her, knowing that she has no way of defending herself. Lortel tries to stop him, saying that she knows about his relationship with Elka, but he is the strongest person among everyone present, so they cannot afford to let him leave, and Peenia agrees, adding that Elka is also with a second-year student. She suggests that perhaps they should trust that second-year student, causing Ziggs to hesitate as he starts considering staying. Peenia confirms once more with the girl that she said someone else was with Elka, and she agrees, though she hesitates as if she is trying to say something. Ziggs gets annoyed and tells her to just spit out whatever she is hiding. And she finally admits that Elka is with Ed Roth-Taylor, immediately pissing Ziggs off. She apologizes while crying, saying that the douchebag refused to leave the library even after dark, so she got irritated and left Elka to deal with him because he is such a terrible person. But Elka told her that she doesn't care about rumors like that, and hearing this makes everyone tense. The other students start commenting about how serious it would be if that librarian were trapped alone with someone like Ed. Peenia still tries to stop Ziggs and tells him to hold on, saying that perhaps they should trust Ed anyway. And hearing her suggestion leaves everyone completely speechless. Ziggs doesn't say a word and immediately flies toward the library. Along the way, he encounters several spirits, but quickly takes them down in his anger, shouting that if Ed even dared to touch a single strand of her hair, he would turn him into minced meat. We now get a flashback of Ziggs, who is in a forest, hunting and tracking down his prey. As he forages through the grass, he comes across a large prey. This is the northern grasslands of the Empire, a barbaric land where the Emperor's rule barely has any effect. A place where you always have to watch your back, where you could meet your death at any moment. Ziggs was descended from the nomads who wandered these lands. By the time he was old enough to fend for himself, he was already alone, with no way of knowing when or why he was abandoned, or if he would ever be able to live in a community. Before he learned how to read, he learned how to kill a deer, and before he understood how to buy things from a shop, he had to learn how to get what he needed from an animal carcass on the roadside. His life was no different from that of a wild beast. It was there that he encountered Elka, who asked him for his name, and he simply replied, Ziggs. With a smile on her face, she tells him that he looks like a wolf walking on 2 legs. It was then that Ziggs realized something. He had wandered the endless grasslands of the north for as long as he could remember. He had survived by eating the corpses of animals left on the road, and slept beneath the stars every night, a young wolf abandoned by his pack. And realizing just how lonely his life had been, tears began flowing from his eyes. That day, he met the person he wanted to spend the rest of his life with, as Elka and her father welcomed him into their family. And as he slowly adapted to the fast-paced life of civilization, his time in the wilderness quickly faded into a distant memory, and the young wolf gradually became a human. But if it means protecting her, he would not hesitate to become a beast once again. He had heard the rumors about Ed, that he tampered with someone's entrance exam, insulted the princess, and even harassed a younger student. And so, he quickly rushes toward the library in a panic, desperately searching for Elka. On the way, he encounters Ed, who appears to be injured, and Ziggs grabs him by the collar, asking where Elka is, while Ed wonders why he is here, but Ziggs insists on knowing Elka's location first, so Ed tells him she is in reading room 3. He immediately leaves him behind and rushes toward her. And there, he finds her sleeping peacefully, finally allowing Ziggs to breathe a sigh of relief. Now that he looks around, he notices that the bookshelves seem too heavy for even an adult to move, yet they have been arranged around Elka as if they were protecting her. The blackout curtains have also been shut to keep the berserk spirits from noticing them. And there are writings telling her to stay calm and remain inside the room once she wakes up, assuring her that everything will be over before dawn, while instructing her to block the exit, avoid provoking the spirits, and prioritize her own safety above everything else. All of this makes it clear to him that someone had gone out of their way to keep Elka safe. Then he notices blood, but realizes that it isn't Elka's. Instead, it belongs to someone who was already injured, yet further damaged his own body to protect Elka rather than worry about his own safety. And that person was Ed Taylor, leaving Ziggs to wonder why he would do something like this. We go back 3 hours earlier, when the bookshelves started falling, and Ed managed to save Elka, grateful that he had been training his body to become stronger, especially since events were happening much faster than he expected. Judging by the summoning circle, he realizes that the Glaskin subjugation arc must have already begun. But he is certain that Taylor will take care of it, so he needs to avoid paying attention to where all the important characters are gathering, because the most important thing is making sure he doesn't change the future. But he still can't afford to waste this precious opportunity, and with countless low-ranking spirits soon covering the campus, he needs to block the door so they can't enter, giving him the chance to work on improving his shelter. And so, he plans to spend the night researching while snacking on jerky, but then he suddenly realizes something. The reason Janika's abilities are so special is because she has extremely high proficiency in both spiritual understanding and spiritual resonance. But being able to see spirits is an ability that has to be unlocked first, meaning someone like him who cannot even see them has no way of raising his spiritual stats normally. However, Janika has just summoned countless spirits into physical form. In other words, this is an enormous opportunity for him to farm experience, and he silently thanks Janika for it. Thanks to this, his skills improve at an unbelievable rate, with Ignite already reaching level 12 and his Spirit-type magic reaching level 7. And he only needs one more level, because if both of his spiritual skills reach a combined level of 15, he can make a contract with a spirit as well. Though he believes he has done everything he can, and just then, Ziggs arrives and asks Ed what he is doing here. Ed assumes that perhaps Ziggs couldn't just leave him behind while he was covered in injuries, so there is no point in lying, and he tells him that he was training. He expects Ziggs not to believe him, but surprisingly, he does, saying that he finally understands what kind of person Ed is, and that he has been like this from the very beginning. He then bows to Ed, saying that he owes him a great debt and will repay him as soon as he gets the chance. Ed remembers that Ziggs and Elka are together, and she is important enough to his character that she is even listed as a named side character in the character information guide, something he had completely forgotten. But Ziggs's role is to remain Taylor's friend and stay by his side until the very end, making him an extremely important character. So Ed tells him that judging by what is happening, Ziggs must have left everyone behind to come here, and now that he has confirmed Elka is safe, he should hurry back. He should also go help Taylor, because if he does what Ed says, everything should work out for the best, and Ziggs confirms that he is talking about Taylor McClure, which Ed agrees with. But Ziggs is confused and asks why Ed thinks so highly of him when he has never even spoken to him before. Ed replies that it is more about how useful Ziggs will be in this fight, because he is the only one who can pierce the hard hide of the high-ranking fire spirit Taken using his elemental slash, which is apparently his signature move, and he is supposed to learn it in Chapter 9 of Act 1 to get through this chapter. Ziggs thanks him for the advice and leaves, while Ed thinks that giving him this much guidance should get the story moving in the right direction. But suddenly, Ed realizes something and wonders why Ziggs isn't friends with Taylor yet. In Chapter 9 of Act 1, Taylor loses badly to Ziggs, but manages to obtain Elemental Slash and uses it to cut through Ziggs's magic, impressing Ziggs and causing the two of them to become friends. But the final chapter of Act 1 has already begun an entire month earlier than it was supposed to, while the end-of-semester evaluation from Chapter 9 hasn't even happened yet. Which means Taylor and Ziggs aren't friends yet, and Taylor hasn't learned Elemental Slash, meaning there is currently no one in the attack unit capable of dealing any real damage to Taken. Ed simply hadn't noticed it until now, but the story he knew was already falling apart. Back at Student Square, Ziggs apologizes to everyone for being late. Peenia tells him it's fine, because she is certain that even if he had been with them, they would have been defeated anyway, as their first infiltration attempt has already failed. Claire tells Peenia to let Ziggs rest until his pain subsides, and then have him join her again, but Peenia tells him to rest for now. Claire argues that if Peenia truly wants to be considerate, she should take back her order and Penia frustratingly replies that she has a heart too. Thankfully, they manage to retreat in time, but Claire is down, and Clevius, the top first-year student, has also been injured. And while wondering what to do next, Penia issues a new order, telling those who remain to take down Taken and do their best. But suddenly, Ed walks in and says that they don't have enough time for everyone to focus on taking down Taken. Judging by the progress of the summoning circle, it won't be long before it is completed. This is the last thing Ed wanted to do, but he has no other choice. He finally steps forward and says that they will split into 2 teams, with him leading one of them, as he decides to get involved in the main story. Everyone is quite surprised to see Ed here. Clevius speaks up and asks Ed if he is joking, but Zig stops him and tells him to let Ed speak. Ed explains that they need to get past Taken, the fire spirit summoned by Janica, before they can go after Janica herself, who has been taken over by the dark spirit Velisper. But as they already know from fighting Taken, its hide is far too tough for any of them to damage, so they shouldn't waste time trying to defeat it. Instead, one group will distract Taken while the other gets past it and heads into the training hall to take down Janica. Lortel is strongly against the idea, saying that this Taken is different from the one Janica summoned during their training duel, and they only managed to escape that time through sheer luck. If the group distracting Taken fails or gets wiped out, the fire spirit will simply go after the attacking group, forcing them to fight both Velisper and Taken at once, making the plan far too risky. Penia tells Lortel that she can only call it too risky if she has a better option, because their most important objective is taking down Janica, and once she is defeated, Taken will be incapacitated as well. Ziggs asks who is supposed to act as the bait in this plan. Elvira answers that it would basically have to be whoever has a death wish. Taylor raises his hand and volunteers to be the bait, but Ed rejects the idea, saying that Taylor needs to be part of the attacking unit heading into the training hall. Taylor argues that he is fast and doesn't know how long he would be able to keep running. But if someone has to put their life on the line, it should be him, though Ed tells him that he has it all wrong. They aren't picking out sacrificial lambs here, and there is no need to divide their forces equally between the 2 groups. Instead, Ed picks Clevius and Lortel to join him in luring Taken away, causing both of them to reject the idea with shocked expressions. But Ed tells them to trust him because he has a plan, though Lortel isn't exactly convinced, and Clevius would rather die than team up with Ed. Penia agrees with everything Ed says, even though she still doesn't understand what his motive is. Regardless, she uses her authority as the princess and orders everyone to divide into 2 groups. Taylor, Ziggs, Elvira, Ayla, and Penia will head toward Janica, while Clevius, Lortel, and Ed will lure Taken away. And before they leave, Penia tells them not to get themselves killed, no matter what. Now at the Nail Hall corridor, Lortel asks Ed how he plans to buy everyone enough time against that lizard, and he simply tells her to do as he says, because as long as they stick to the plan, they will definitely win. He tells Clevius not to worry and assures him that everything will be fine, while Clevius wonders why Ed is so confident, since although he is a coward who lacks confidence in his own abilities, he is still the top student of the first-year combat department. And seeing Ed act like this makes Clevius wonder if he has some kind of foolproof plan. Janica is inside the training hall behind those doors, so all they have to do is distract Taken, just as Ed instructed. Clevius came this far because the princess's unwavering attitude managed to win him over. But at least he isn't alone, which makes him smile as he thinks that perhaps he can finally be brave this time. As they reach Taken, the fire spirit lets out a massive roar and begins charging up an attack. Clevius looks over and says that the battle has begun, asking how they are supposed to lure it away, only to realize that Ed and Lortel are already gone. He is left completely stunned as Taken moves closer behind him, and he immediately starts running in panic, shouting that they tricked him and wondering why they would do this to him, before cursing both of them as he desperately flees. Meanwhile, Lortel appears to be walking alone towards somewhere. We go back a little, where Ed tells her that they should get out of there and let Clevius charge down the Nail Hall corridor. Lortel asks if he planned to sacrifice Clevius all along, saying that while it might work, people would question the morality of his decision, but Ed replies that Clevius isn't going to be sacrificed. He is a top student, after all, and incredibly durable. And besides, Lortel has the most important role to play here. Back in the present, at the outer wall of Nail Hall outside the training hall, Ed has told Lortel that she is responsible for forging a path for the other group to reach Janica, meaning she will also be the one dealing the most damage to Taken. And after seeing Ed act like this, Lortel realizes that you really shouldn't judge someone based on the rumors surrounding them. Ed also told her that while everyone else would hesitate to do something like this, she is good at these kinds of things, isn't she? So all she has to do is blow the whole thing up. And that's exactly what Lortel does, completely destroying the wall with her ice magic. The attacking team is stunned by what she has done, while she asks them what they are standing around for, telling them that it's their time to shine now. Lortel remembers that she has done something like this before, when she blew up the roof of Nail Hall using intermediate-level magic during the joint combat training, which is exactly why Ed left this part to her. She smirks and calls Ed quite amusing. But regardless, the others can now get through. As for the rest, Lortel looks over at Clevius, who is still cursing Ed while running away from Taken. Lortel thinks that even if they succeed and the attacking unit makes it into Nail Hall without dealing with Taken, she and Clevius will still have to face the fire spirit after luring it away. So she wonders if Ed is really telling them to lure the fire spirit all the way to Student Square, where they would have nowhere to escape and would inevitably be killed. But Ed tells her that they cannot escape, meaning they have no choice but to defeat Taken. Lortel argues that none of their attacks can penetrate its hide, as Ed must have seen during the combat training, and even when they attacked it together earlier, they couldn't hurt it. But Ed replies that he can deal with its hide somehow, and all she needs to do is charge up her strongest magic attacks and be ready, while Lortel notices the pouch in his hands and asks what it is. Ed agrees with Lortel that without the elemental slash attack, none of them have any way to pierce Taken's incredibly tough hide. And so, what they need instead is overwhelming power. And for that, Ed has come to Lucy, who is fast asleep. The final chapter is difficult enough to begin with, so very few players ever manage to clear all of its extra conditions. But Ed has completed it countless times. Lucy speaks in her sleep, wondering why the ground is shaking and asking everyone to let her sleep a little longer, while Ed wonders how she can possibly be napping through all of this. After destroying his shelter and losing her favorite place to nap, Lucy moved to this roof, her previous napping spot, but she has been sleeping through all these events because she was supposed to be kept away from the main storyline. Janica is currently in a terrible state, which has also put Belle Maya on edge. So Lucy has been using up all of her magic power while running away from Belle, eventually falling asleep here. And Ed realizes that this must have been the game's way of keeping such an overpowered character out of the final boss fight. But Ed takes out some beef jerky, and Lucy immediately wakes up as soon as she smells it. He stuffs all of it into her mouth and tells her to eat her fill. Then he aims her toward the lizard, wondering if he can even throw her that far, but decides to trust himself, knowing he did this plenty of times during his military service. And with that, he throws Lucy toward Taken, shouting for everyone else to get down. Meanwhile, Lucy tries to complain that Ed is being mean to her, even with her mouth stuffed full of jerky. And just as Taken launches its attack, Lucy lands between them and interrupts it. She then unleashes divine lightning on Taken, causing a massive bolt of lightning to descend from the sky. Lortel and Clevius panic and immediately raise barriers to protect themselves, while Ed is also pushed backward by the sheer force of the attack. Ed realizes that this is the crucial moment, because Taken is a high-ranking fire spirit whose thick hide made it impossible for anyone to defeat, but after being struck by Lucy's high-level magic, its hide is finally beginning to crumble, which means their attacks can finally damage it, and taking down Taken will reward them with an enormous amount of experience. And since Ed has come this far, he plans to take full advantage of the opportunity by taking the kill for himself. We now get a flashback of Janica, as her mother tells her that she is proud of her and loves her very much. We also see her friends and teachers, all having extremely high expectations of her, constantly praising her, taking her side, and putting their faith in her. They believe that without her, the second year would have been the worst class, so they are all glad that she is there with them. Back to the present, everyone arrives at the training hall, where Janica takes notice of them, and she tells herself that she needs to greet them with her usual smile, even though she seems to be completely in control of Velisper. Ed realizes that the fight against Janica has just begun, and according to the story, this chapter is supposed to end before dawn. And thankfully, he has made it here in time. He asks Lortel about Lucy, and she replies that she is rolling around somewhere in the corner, though Ed had hoped she could have landed the finishing blow as well, while Lortel says that she doesn't know if Lucy has enough mana left for that. So Ed says that they will take care of it themselves, but Lortel replies that she is trying, though Taken is still holding on even after she landed 2 ice spear attacks using a huge amount of her magic. Ed tells her that she needs to slash its neck, since her ice magic isn't suited for cutting things, so he will take care of it. But Lortel argues that shouldn't he leave it to Clevius, who actually uses a sword, since Ed is also in the magic department like her. But Ed looks at her and asks if she thinks he can do it, and she disagrees. Ed tells Lortel to trust him and says that he will put an end to this, so all she has to do is slow Taken down for a moment, because he is putting his life in her hands and she needs to pay attention. Lortel is confused and replies that he seems to have no trouble putting his own life in other people's hands, or telling people to trust him even when it's nothing more than a gamble. But Ed replies that it isn't a gamble, because putting your life on the line isn't like betting money. This is an investment. Hearing this, Lortel smirks and says that investing is her specialty. And she says that she prefers him over that princess who gets pulled around from one side to another, despite pretending to be a leader solely because she has imperial blood backing her up. And since he has decided to put his life in her hands, she decides to put hers in his as well. And so, Ed rushes forward while Clevius jumps into action. Taken begins preparing an attack, while Ed notes that both of them are at the end of their ropes, and he knows exactly how Clevius feels. Ed also prepares his wind magic, knowing that he needs to get even closer. Suddenly, they all notice a huge hand appearing above the training hall. Ed realizes that it's Glaskin's right arm, which must mean that Taylor and the others are preparing their final attack, meaning the story is advancing just as it should. But the timing couldn't be worse, because anyone would be distracted by a sight like this. And we see Taken preparing to land its attack on Ed, but it gets stopped by an ice attack. Ed realizes that even with that terrifying scene unfolding ahead of them, Lortel didn't miss her chance. And Ed takes advantage of the opening as well, sliding down while preparing his wind attack, knowing that he isn't going to miss his chance either. With that wind slash, he finally cuts through Taken's neck and takes the fire spirit down. And with the kill, he gains a large number of abilities at higher levels and even unlocks the ability to form a spirit contract. He then looks toward Glaskin's hand and notices Taylor flying toward it. And Taylor completely slashes through the hand, finally destroying it. Ed remembers and realizes once again that Taylor really is the protagonist of this story. Everyone looks up at the sky, realizing that it is finally over. Now fast forward a little, and dawn finally arrives. Lortel tells Ed that she has met plenty of people who talk about putting their lives on the line, but most of them turn out to be cowards, and Ed agrees. Lortel then asks if that is really all he has to say after they just went through such a life-threatening event together. So Lortel decides to properly introduce herself to Ed once again. And as he shakes her hand, she slips the 3 gold coins he rejected earlier into his hand, saying that she has won this time. And since he let his guard down, he now owes her one. She tells him that she will be seeing him again soon, making Ed wonder if Lortel intends to keep acting like they are already acquainted, because he really doesn't want to get involved with her. And now, another person starts walking toward him. It's Taylor, who tells Ed that he resents him, and Ed must know why, while Ed notices his white hair and thinks that he looks cool, meaning he must have awakened his swordmaster skill. But regardless, Taylor bows to Ed and tells him that he owes him a great debt. Clevius immediately starts complaining to Taylor that Ed is a terrible person and will eventually backstab him. But everyone else tells him to shut up. Princess Peenia tells Ed that he did a lot for them and asks if he would like her to report his deeds to the student council, but Ed quickly rejects the offer. He says that in the end, Lucy was the one who dealt most of the damage to Taken, while Taylor was the one who defeated Velisper and Glaskin, so she should give them the credit instead. Elvira smirks and asks Ed if he is really denying his own contribution, saying that everyone already knows how important Lucy and Taylor were, but they are talking about everything else he did. So is he just embarrassed to admit it? Hearing this, Zig steps in and tells Elvira to be more polite to her elders, which annoys her because everyone keeps taking Ed's side. Meanwhile, Ed thinks about how hard he has tried to keep his distance from the main characters so he wouldn't influence the original storyline. But now that he is standing this close to them, he can't help but feel something warm inside. Because he has watched these characters play out their roles countless times, overcoming every obstacle thrown at them for the sake of this world. Taylor, who grows stronger with every ordeal he goes through, and Ayla, who grows stronger for Taylor's sake. Peenia, who matures with every incident as she moves toward becoming the ruler she is destined to be. Ziggs, who forges his own path within civilization. Clevius, who gains confidence in himself, and Elvira, who realizes that life isn't just about fun and entertainment. And Lortel, who begins reflecting on a life that had been dedicated solely to making more gold. They are all main characters in this story, playing the roles they were given, and at the end of it all, success awaits them. And knowing this, Ed turns away. He then returns to the training hall, remembering that when he played the game, he was never able to come back here at this point. This was the stage after the end of the boss fight. The spare platform where Lucy had been napping during the joint combat training. He couldn't help but come here, because he felt like something was missing. After all, in order to put the spotlight on the protagonist, someone had to stay backstage, and we see that person hiding there, as Janica greets Ed with a smile. Seeing her, Ed remembers asking Lortel what caused Janica to lose control, and she had a theory. She had once caught a glimpse of Janica's room. Every item inside was a sign of sincere appreciation, but despite how large her desk was, there wasn't even enough space to place a book or two. The writings pinned to the wall weighed on her like massive boulders, and it would have been easy to escape that burden. All she had to do was take down the notes and put the gifts away. But the tragedy of her room was that she was like an innocent girl from a fairy tale who could never bring herself to do such a thing. She obsessively tried to repay everyone's appreciation and meet their high expectations by giving her absolute best. But it was incredibly reckless, and the darkness inside her was enough for Velisper to take hold, meaning it was only a matter of time before Janica succumbed to it. But Ed wonders why all of this had to happen a month earlier than it should have, since Taylor was supposed to be the one praised for the victory here. But because Lucy defeated him, everyone ended up becoming a fan of Janica instead. The reason Taylor lost so completely to Lucy was because she had made a contract with Marilda, and she was able to do so because she kept visiting the northern forest. And the reason for that was because she had found the perfect place to nap. And the person who provided that spot happened to be someone who was supposed to have left the academy at the start of Act 1. Janica gets up and says that she understands why Lucy was napping here, since it was nice and cozy, and she didn't expect anyone to find her. But it seemed like everyone had forgotten about her, which hurt a little. She had run amok on such a grand stage, but now that it was over, nobody cared anymore, and she thought they would at least come looking for her. She didn't expect him to find her so quickly, since she wanted to stay here for a little while. Ed asks why, and she replies that she wanted to bawl her eyes out. Ed remembers the wolf's request, thinking that it was almost as if it wanted him to prevent this from happening to Janica. But there was no way he could do that, and he was the only one who knew the future. So he was sure the wolf had figured out that the person who didn't care for Janica, while everyone else was fawning over her, might actually be someone she could rely on. And in the end, Janica failed, because she had been trying to form a contract with another high-ranking spirit, but became careless with the summoning and ended up being consumed by a dark spirit. She had studied day and night to improve her magic, and always greeted her family, fellow students, and teachers with a smile. She tried her absolute best to meet everyone's expectations when nobody was watching. Every step of her journey was beautiful because of the effort she put into it, and that was why even her failure was beautiful. And so, Ed calls out to Janica, knowing that his words might not be comforting enough, but he still tells her that she did great. When the main characters walked onto the stage, they were greeted with applause. But backstage, everything was quiet and dark. The protagonist's every move overshadowed what happened to the final boss of Act 1. Ed had replayed Act 1 countless times, and now, he felt like he had finally given it a proper ending. The low-ranking spirits begin showing interest in Ed, and the high-ranking spirit, Marilda, shows an even greater interest in him. Now fast forward 10 days after Janica's disciplinary hearing. She pleaded guilty to everything and stated that she would accept whatever punishment they deemed appropriate. But even during the first round of hearings, all of Janica's friends and supervising professors stood up in her defense. During the second round, Peenia declared that the palace would not charge Janica with attempting to harm a member of the imperial family, testifying that she had been controlled and never intended for this to happen. Lortel stepped in when it came to the costs of rebuilding the destroyed campus buildings, with the Elk Company agreeing to cover the reconstruction for free. In exchange, the Academy would cut the customs charged on any supplies sold there in half. But regardless, Janica lost all financial support she received as a top student, had to return all her honorary awards, and lost the right to live in Ophilus Hall starting next semester. She was also given 10 days of probation and 20 days of suspension, but she managed to avoid expulsion. Everyone was happy about that, but Janica still seemed down, which caused her friends to step in. They agreed not to bring up the Glaskin incident, act like they didn't feel sorry for her, and steer the conversation toward more trivial gossip. And so, they get ready to cheer her up. But Janica suddenly starts blushing and asks why they think there is such a big difference between liking and loving someone. Seeing her like this, her friends are stunned and ask where this suddenly came from, and Janica replies that it is about her friend. The other day, her supposed friend had a dream about something, and we see Janica sitting like a princess in a garden as someone approaches her. It's Ed, who looks like her prince, as she places a flower crown she made for him on his head. They then run off together hand in hand, and Janica tells her friends that her friend keeps having dreams like that, making them think that she had been on probation for the past 10 days and couldn't have seen anyone. So claiming it was about her friend was obviously stupid. Anise asks Janica what else her friend told her, and Janica replies that whenever she sits in her room and stares at the wall, his face keeps coming to mind, causing Anise to suddenly run away, claiming that she remembered she needed to help a professor with something. Clara thinks that she needs to approach this carefully and slowly so Janica doesn't get hurt in any way. And if she isn't careful, the entire academy will find out in an instant, because Janica being in love would make the gossip train unstoppable. So she tells Janica that it's not as complicated as she thinks. Liking or disliking someone is difficult to explain. So being honest with her feelings is the best thing she can do, and Janica agrees, saying that she knew she could count on her. Clara also warns her to be careful when bringing up such delicate matters, since talking about it too much could make both her and her friend look bad, and Janica quickly agrees. But regardless, she thanks Clara for listening to her and heads back to Ophelis Hall to write her suspension report, while Clara decides to stay behind and think about things. And once Janica leaves, Clara slams her head onto the table after finally figuring out how to deal with Janica's dilemma. Back to Ed, who apparently doesn't have to save up coins anymore, because Peenia put in a good word for him, making his tuition free. And so, he uses the gold coins he was given to buy some tools. He then notices Janica fidgeting nearby and realizes that he has been avoiding her for a while, but now that Act 1 is over and Janica is no longer the final boss. He figures he can probably talk to her again, so he greets her and asks if her probation is over. She gets incredibly nervous and hides behind a tree while greeting him back, trying her best to be honest with her feelings. But she quickly runs away in embarrassment, saying that she still has things to do at Ophelis Hall, proving that this task is extremely difficult for Janica. Meanwhile, Ed is stunned, wondering how he managed to drive away someone as kind-hearted as Janica. But regardless, he decides to focus on his own work, because it's finally time for him to build a cabin for himself. On day 1, he decides where to build his cabin, choosing a wide-open space with plenty of shade that was out of the way, and starts flattening the ground. By day 3, he begins gathering lumber, which goes quite smoothly thanks to how much he has trained his wind/attack. On day 6, it is time for the end-of-semester evaluations, so he pauses construction for a while, does fairly well on his written exam, and while his practical grades still need work, he has improved greatly compared to where he started. And for some reason, Janica keeps avoiding him. Her friends, Clara and Anise, keep giving him warning looks as if telling him not to go near her, though he doesn't intend to anyway. By day 18, he has almost gathered all the wood needed for the cabin, and he begins wondering if anyone has ever trained their wind/attack as much as he has. By day 20, the semester break begins, allowing him to spend the entire day at his camp. And when he checks his snare trap, he finds Lucy caught in it, sound asleep, so he decides to stop using beef jerky as bait. On day 27, Belle Maya, a senior maid of Ophelis Hall, comes to visit and shares some medicinal herbs and mushrooms with him, before asking how things are going between him and Janica. So he tells her that he must have done something to upset Janica, but Maya only tilts her head in confusion. On day 30, one of the pillars he had set up falls over, causing the exterior wall to come tumbling down, and he realizes that simply making the joints fit together isn't enough to make the structure sturdy. He also runs into Janica and her friends near the bakery in the commercial district, and she runs away as soon as their eyes meet, as usual, causing her friends to realize something. By day 37, Ziggs comes by to help and tells Ed that Taylor really is a good guy just like he said, making Ed think that things are finally moving according to the story. By day 45, Ed finally seems to have finished his cabin, as he steps inside and sits down. He notes that there is no flooring yet, and the walls are still drafty, since the cabin is nothing more than a crude structure made from wooden logs. But it has exterior walls and a roof, and if he closes the doors, he can at least keep the bugs out. He finally smiles after completing it, because he finally has a house. And outside, we see Janica standing there, staring at Ed and making up her mind about something. Inside his new cabin, Ed thinks that once he finishes the flooring and walls, it would be nice to add some furniture and a fireplace, as well as build a fence around the cabin, and he also plans to make a small shed to store his tools and firewood. Suddenly, he hears a loud noise coming from the top of his cabin, and we see that it's Lucy again, as Ed tells her that this isn't her cat tower. Janica finally shows herself as well and nervously greets Ed, who greets her back. Ed then asks what brings her here, leaving her sweating as she wonders what she should say. Sometime earlier, Belle Maya told her that when she stopped by the forest the other day, she visited Master Ed's campsite and saw something quite amazing. Janica asks if she is talking about the cabin, and Belle Maya asks how she knows about it. So Janica replies that she saw it while passing by. Ed had told Belle Maya that he built it himself, and she was impressed by how well made it was, never expecting him to be so handy. Maya then leans closer and whispers to Janica that she really wanted to go inside and inspect it properly to see how sturdy it was, causing Janica to blush and admit that she thought the same thing. Maya explains that she is only human after all, and anyone would naturally want to take a closer look at a cabin in the woods after seeing it, and wondering who built it and how. Remembering this, Janica immediately uses the same excuse to get inside Ed's cabin. She praises his cabin for looking amazing, and Ed asks if the spirits told her about it. Janica stutters and says they did, but only in passing, and they didn't tell her much about it. But in reality, they told Janica all about how good his muscles looked when he took his shirt off and how thick his veins had gotten, which causes her to get a nosebleed, while she tells Ed that she doesn't actually talk to the spirits that much, and that she doesn't know much about how he has been doing. Ed asks if she would like to look around inside, and invites her in. Janica blushes and smiles before nodding her head. She is genuinely impressed by everything and asks if he really made it all by himself. Now fast forward, and they are sitting beside the fire, with Janica saying that she owes everyone a huge debt. She never expected the princess or Lortel to help her this much, and even some of her friends offered to lend her money for tuition, so she doesn't know how she could ever repay everyone. But Ed tells her that if she can't repay them, then she shouldn't, because the idea that you have to repay every single favor is old-fashioned, and Janica admits that she never thought about it that way. Ed knows that this is exactly how Janica is, and the whole reason things went this far was because she was weighed down by everyone's well-intentioned expectations, something most people would never realize. The reason she decided to move from the luxurious Ophilus Hall to Dex Hall, the oldest dormitory on campus, despite people offering to fund her, was probably because she didn't want to owe anyone that much. But while students in Ophilus Hall get their own rooms, every room in Dex Hall is shared by at least 8 students, meaning having to deal with the admiring gazes of her friends all day must feel like being chained inside a prison. So in the end, her root problem hasn't been solved, and the vicious cycle hasn't been broken. And so, Ed tells her that if she ever wants to be alone, she can visit his cabin anytime. He promises that he will leave her alone. This makes her smile as she says that it makes her really happy. She also tells Ed that if he ever finds himself in trouble or needs help, she hopes he will turn to her. And she promises that she will help him whenever he does. Ed also smiles after hearing that. From there, he remembers that the second semester is about to begin, and they are getting closer to the beginning of the second act of the game. The Sage's Sealed Tome, this worn and ancient book, is at the center of an incident that will sweep across the entire academy, as Lortel smirks upon seeing it and comments that it certainly looks expensive. Ed tells Janica that he appreciates her saying that, but it won't be necessary, and believes that the upcoming incident won't matter, at least as far as he is concerned. As he tells Taylor that he is going to have a lot to deal with soon, and while it has nothing to do with Ed, it would still suck for him. Now we are at episode 2, the occupation of Ophilus Hall. Students who qualify to live in this hall are guaranteed a life of luxury, being given the right to choose their seats before everyone else, eat meals whenever they want, and receive their own personal maids. This is where the trouble begins, as the semester break comes to an end and students prepare to return to campus, only for a torrential rainstorm to sweep across the southwestern region of Bel Air, where Akin Island is located. The academy provides carriages and boats for returning students, even allowing them to arrive a few days late without consequences, but this privilege is limited to the students of Ophilus Hall. The students of Dex Hall, who have to struggle through the rain to reach campus and worry about arriving late and receiving demerits, become furious over the situation. And eventually, they snap. And of course, all of this was planned by a certain merchant. The merchant had contacted Willine, the representative of the underachieving students, beforehand, and he was more than willing to get revenge against the academy and Ophilus Hall. Complaints against the academy were already at an all-time high, and as long as the underachieving and regular students were given enough reason to become angry, Willine, who was skilled at inciting mobs and giving speeches, would do the rest. And the reason already existed, the extreme difference in treatment between elite and regular students, along with the proposal that elite students from Ophilus Hall be given several extra days to return to the academy. The head maid who governs Ophilus Hall, along with several academy administrators, is already on Lortel's side, so they would support the proposal without hesitation. At this point, it didn't even matter whether the academy actually approved the proposal, because the fact that it had been suggested was enough to enrage the regular students. The incident needed to be big and noticeable. Numerous works of art belonging to noble houses and powerful families are displayed throughout Ophilus Hall, and everything inside was crafted by master artisans. The more property they destroyed, the better, because if the enraged students went all out, the academy, already struggling financially after the Glaskin incident, would become desperate and give the Elt Company a huge advantage during negotiations. Those negotiations were currently focused on the sale of the Sage's Sealed Tome, a magic book important enough to be called the heart of the academy, yet the people in charge were willing to put something that valuable on the table. There was no sign of light among the dark clouds, and it reminded her of the sky she used to stare at between the tattered roofs of the slums. She began to feel guilty about how complacent she had become, because there were so many sources of light throughout this campus of learning, a place filled with hope and idealism. But all that light did was illuminate just how much darkness had seeped into her while she lived in it. The countless schemes spread across her table were proof of that, traces left behind by someone who never revealed her true thoughts and always sought to deceive and suspect others. She had changed in order to adapt and survive, but that didn't erase the darkness rooted deep inside her. And so, she sought out others who were like herself. Because even at this academy, it was possible that someone might approve of the efforts of a nasty little sewer rat like her. But as long as she clung to that futile hope, her nature would never change, and she comments on how lonely it is. In order to survive this reality, Lortel always used the same strategy, staying behind the scenes and covering up the grim truth. And the name for someone like that was the mastermind. Outside the hall, students shout and chant about their oppression, declaring that they won't take it anymore. In the original story, the occupation of Awfulest Hall has to be stopped by the protagonist. Several mid-bosses assist the rioting students and stand in the protagonist's way, while a maid nervously prepares to report everything to the head maid. Decoy Tot, the mid-boss of the first floor, was the one who mocked Taylor for failing his classes and was easily won over by Lortel after being defeated by Taylor and his friends. His role is to deal with the new maid guarding the first floor, and then open the door to Awfulest Hall, allowing the students to rush inside. As all the students enter to make their voices heard, standing between the protagonist and his friends once the other students get inside is Decoy Tot, the mid-boss of the first phase of Act 2. Walline asks if he is the one Lortel recruited, and the man removes his hood, revealing that he is in charge of guarding the first floor. But it turns out to be Ed, even though this role was technically supposed to belong to Tot. So Ed wonders, how did he end up becoming a mid-boss? And to explain how he ended up here, he has to go back to what happened 2 days ago. We get to see his combat skills details, with his specialty being archery, and he seems to be tracking a small animal. And with this, Ed is once again reminded how poor his talent is when it comes to combat skills. He has been forcing himself to use a bow whenever he goes hunting, but even after a whole semester and half of the break, his archery skill hasn't improved much. But more importantly, these days, various guests have been stopping by more regularly than before, as we see Maya and Zix both greet Ed. It feels as if more and more people are finding out that he lives in the northern forests, in a cabin by himself. And in any case, among his regular visitors, there are 3 noteworthy individuals. Guest number 1 is a genius mage who visits at random. Lucy is quite excited to see that he has a door and asks Ed to create a back door as well, and also asks if he is going to build a chimney. But Ed kicks her out through the window, only for her to pop up again and ask a bunch of questions, making Ed think that guest number 1 is hard to control. But Ed actually welcomes guest number 2, Janica, who has brought him some eggs, as Belle told her that Ed would be happy if she brought him some, and she is the top of the second-year class and quite a talented elementalist. She also helps him with his laundry, saying that if he adds salt water to it, it gets nice and white, just like her parents used to do. And Ed thinks that since he told her she could come whenever she wanted, she really started coming by every day, chatting with the spirits or helping him with a few chores here and there, and he is extremely grateful to her. And he also compliments her by telling her that she is the best, causing her to turn away and blush, which confuses Ed. Janica then asks him how often Lucy visits his camp, with Ed thinking that while she seems easy to read, sometimes he really doesn't understand her. And the main reason he brought this up is guest number 3, as she tells him that he looks quite busy, and we see that it's Lortel, who seems to have been waiting for him. And she asks Ed if he can help her. She is the mastermind behind the incidents in Act 2 of the game, and she was most likely recruiting useful individuals for her Awfulest Hall occupation plot. But Ed really doesn't want to get involved, so he decides to reject her offer no matter what. But Lortel tells Ed that she really didn't want to go this far. And as Ed thinks that if he just stays out of it, everything will go according to the story, Lortel tells him that if only Tot hadn't fainted, which shocks Ed. As he wonders why things aren't going according to the story, he grabs Lortel and asks why Tot fainted, telling her to explain everything. Ed remembers that Tot was supposed to pick a fight with Taylor and get beaten up just enough by Taylor. And his next line was that Taylor was nothing but an insect who was even worse than Ed Roth Taylor. And it caused Zix to immediately punch him right into the ground in anger. Lortel also tells Ed that Elvira said she had never seen Zix this angry before, though it was unclear whether he was defending Taylor or Ed. So she cannot really put her trust in someone so temperamental, and the favor she is asking of Ed is simple. Elris will give him the key to Awfulest Hall. He has to get inside and keep out of sight, But Ed continues the rest, saying that when the underachieving students come rushing in, he just has to open the door for them, and Lortel replies that if it were this easy, anyone could have done it. She may be offering a lot of money, but there is no guarantee that they won't reveal everything during the investigation after it is over. And if it were to come out that she was behind it, things would be bad for her, so she cannot trust just anyone with this, and Ed realizes that she came to him because of his poor reputation. She tries to instigate him, asking if he doesn't want revenge against the academy since he was kicked out of Awfulest Hall. And Ed replies that he isn't interested in revenge, but he is still willing to listen to her offer. She offers him 20 gold coins, and he immediately accepts, thinking that he just has to play it loose, and before the story gets derailed, he just has to set it straight. Now, a day before the incident, the Awfulest Hall occupation happens before the battle for the Sage's sealed tome, and it is Lortel's scheme to drive the Academy's finances into a corner, meaning it leads to the next chapter of the game. According to the game's plot, Lortel's plan succeeds, and she creates her own company within the Academy for profit, which serves to hold Princess Phenia and the Student Council in check. The idealistic Student Council against the pragmatic company, and the important thing here is that whoever Taylor sides with will win. And all Ed plans to do is join whichever side seems like it will win, because he has to be realistic. Janica seems to be here as well, as she comments that she should probably get back to her room, since she thought the rain would have stopped by now. She tells Ed that it must be hard on him, because while she can visit and feel like she is camping on a trip, he has to stay out here even when it rains, and Ed replies that it isn't so bad once you get used to it. From this, Janica says that she needs to get her things from Awfulest Hall as well, since she has to get rid of a lot of things because Dex Hall is smaller than she expected. And so, she asks Ed to tell her if he needs anything, since he might need a lot of things, and he agrees, while Janica continues that she has extra blankets and all sorts of things she can give him. She keeps chattering like this about all the stuff she would like to give him, and Ed smiles as he listens. And he finally replies that it sounds good, so Janica excitedly says that she will bring it over once the semester starts and leaves Awfulest Hall. She then notices Lucy and asks if she is always like that, and Ed replies that she is sometimes. The ridiculous power that Lucy possesses certainly comes with a price, as she has been running away from her fate with the excuse that she is too lazy. And it has been years since she turned her back on her fate, but on a rainy day like this, even someone as carefree as her is forced to reflect on her decision. And so, Ed tells Janica that she acts like this when it rains, so she shouldn't worry and should just ignore her. And Janica gets happy hearing that Ed is really indifferent when it comes to Lucy. He then calls out to Janica to tell her something, as he remembers that she is still staying at Awfulest Hall. As once the occupation begins, numerous ward spells are activated, trapping all the students in their rooms, and someone like her can easily make it out, but still. And so, he tells Janica that he has a favor to ask, and she asks what it is, so Ed tells her that tomorrow around 9 at night, can she come to the Rose Garden in front of Awfulest Hall? Hearing this shocks her, and she blushes heavily, while Ed tells her that he will explain it further when he sees her there. As he can't think of any other way to explain it, he wants to get Janica out of the hall just in case, somewhere not too far, and somewhere she can stay dry from the rain. She quickly stands up and leaves while blushing and saying that she will be on her way, leaving Ed confused. Ed sighs, knowing that the rain won't stop until the first day of the semester, and that he will be able to see clear skies then, after which the forest will begin to smell like fall. The long break is about to end. Now, on the day of the incident, at 9 p.m., we see Zik's training, saying that he needs to stop getting swept away by his anger, and he didn't think that Elka would get so upset with him. And when he finishes up, he notices something outside his window. And it's Ed, who seems to be heading toward Awfulest Hall. He meets up with a maid and asks where the other maids are, and she replies that only a minimum number of them are still working, while the rest are gathered in the meeting room because the head maid summoned them all under the excuse of an important announcement, with the plan being to lock the door and trap them inside, making everything much easier since Lortel has brought the head maid to her side. And she has also prepared the item that Ed requested, so he thanks her for that. And now, everything is in place. And the occupation of Awfulest Hall has begun, as we see many students rushing toward it. They put forward their demands, with Willine leading them from the back. And Ed opens the door for them, causing everyone to be surprised when they see him. But regardless, they all quickly rush inside. And we get to the current scene, where Willine realizes that the person Lortel recruited is Ed. Ed clears his throat and tells Willine that he agrees with everything he said. And while he enjoyed Awfulest Hall as well, now that he has been kicked out, he can finally realize how privileged he was. Willine is moved by his acting, telling Ed that he had no idea he was such a good person. Ed then quickly starts pushing Willine, telling him that they couldn't have done this without him. while Ed thinks that Willine has to be the one to take all the blame. And he also notes that there is no need to go after the maid who is running away, because the higher-up she is trying to report to should be locked inside the meeting room anyway. Elris, the head maid who wields the highest authority here and controls the ward spells, has been brought over by Lortel. And the spells that are supposed to protect the students actually lock them inside their rooms, as they start to panic and wonder what is happening outside. Ed notes that everything is going according to the story now. And now someone arrives, saying that things have started out flashier than they expected. And it's just as she thought. Saying that she knew she could trust Ed, and seeing her, Ed thinks that the mastermind behind all of this has finally taken the stage. Lortel comments that even her socks got drenched, expressing her hatred for the ring. And Ed asks if she was watching from the outside. She replies that they need to hurry and get things moving before the academy staff can intervene, because it would all be over then, and Ed wishes her luck. But she suddenly stops and says that while it might be a strange question, she wants to know if Ed has ever killed anyone. Ed thinks for a moment and replies that he hasn't. Hearing this, she chuckles and says that she hasn't either. But she has done many things that were almost as bad because she needed to survive. In order to survive, she ruined the lives of others, and to avoid getting stabbed in the back, she always struck first. She told herself that it was all inevitable and that her actions were justified, but in reality, it was all just an excuse, and that was how Lortel came to be known as the Golden Daughter. She knows better than anyone that she has no right to be pitied. And so, she keeps searching for others like herself, as she asks Ed if he would pity someone like her. Loneliness is a feeling that can come to anyone, regardless of whether they are good or bad. In order to escape it, one must find others rolling around in the same mud pit, because only when they find someone willing to stay by their side, even in the deepest of pits, can they find salvation. And so, Ed declines to pity her, saying that she needs to take responsibility for her actions, and he doesn't believe that he is someone who belongs in the same mud pit as her. She stays silent for a moment and apologizes for saying something so out of character. And then she says that she will go and do her part, since there isn't much time left. And as she leaves, Ed finally sighs and sits down. Ed remembers that Lortel is about to discuss the next stage of the plan with Elris. They will decide to aggravate the situation by overloading the ward spells in Awfulest Hall after handing the trigger over to Willine, the representative of the underachieving students. And Willine, after receiving all the magic power contained within the countless ward spells throughout Awfulest Hall, becomes the fourth floor boss. The key to this fight is taking down Willine as quickly as possible after he is overtaken by the overloaded spells, and all Ed needs to do is wait for Taylor to barge in. And once he holds them off for a while before letting them win, Taylor will proceed upstairs, though Ed doubts he can get through this scuffle without a few injuries and bruises. But he believes it to be a necessary sacrifice. Now we switch scenes to the Rose Garden, where there is a carriage, even at this time of night. And upon noticing it, Janica assumes that someone important must be here and wonders if she needs to leave. She also assumes that Ed doesn't know about this, and that he simply left this note for her. She blushes, thinking that perhaps he could be preparing something for her. For her, the golden carriage doesn't matter, because she isn't going to leave the Rose Garden no matter what. She has hardly slept for the past 3 days, trying to imagine what the boy wanted to discuss, though she felt guilty about it. Janica had continuously heard about how Ed was doing from Marilda. Lucy wasn't the only one, as Princess Phenia, Belle Maya, Zix, and even Lortel had all been seen leaving for Ed's camp. And the fact that most of them were girls only made things worse. And so, Janica decided to wait, no matter how long it took. Janica then touches her hair clip, thinking that perhaps she shouldn't have worn this persimmon flower clip and that a Cosmos one would have been better. And so, she thinks about running upstairs quickly, deciding to wait for Ed after swapping out her hair clip. And so, she also starts heading toward Awfulest Hall. Meanwhile, we see the main cast arriving, with Taylor asking if charging into Awfulest Hall is really the right decision, and Elvira replies by asking if Taylor has any idea how expensive all the medicinal herbs she hung to dry in her room are. Taylor asks if it wouldn't be better to let the Academy handle this, and Elvira replies that if she doesn't put a preservation spell on them, their properties will change, and even the slightest difference can affect her experiments by a huge amount. He asks Ayla to try and stop her, but Ayla replies that perhaps they should let her be, since she is a top student from the alchemy department, so she is sure Elvira can take care of herself. And Taylor replies that it is the underachieving students who will be in trouble, not Elvira, as she starts throwing reagents left and right without thinking about the repercussions. And so, Ayla also tries to stop her, but Elvira pulls them along and tells them to come with her to her room on the 4th floor. And Ayla asks if they come to her room. She won't do anything then, right? Elvira agrees, saying that she just needs her herbs. And so, she kicks open the door, saying that they will charge and no matter who is standing in their way. And upon opening the gate, they are quite shocked, as Ed is standing in their way. Taylor asks him what he is doing at Ophelis Hall, and Elvira, upon looking around, notes that other students have already passed through and that the furniture has been overturned, and that Ed has his back to the stairs. Elvira steps forward, saying that it is quite interesting, as she didn't expect this, and that he is planning to stop them, isn't he? And Ed apologizes while saying that they cannot get past this point. Elvira smirks, calling it funny and asking if he has any way of stopping her, since she has heard from Zix that his magic skills are quite good. But in the end, he is just a second-year student who can cast nothing but basic magic. While they have a pretty talented swordsman, a mage with at least average skills for a first year, and an alchemist who is at the top of her class. So she believes they have a clear advantage, while Taylor asks Ed why he is doing this and what is going on upstairs. But Ed doesn't say anything, so Taylor rushes at him to attack and force him to talk. Ed first throws a chair in between them to intercept the attack. And Elvira notes that judging by the flow of mana, he is using beginner's magic, so as a mage who is weak in melee combat, he would most likely go after Taylor. But much to her shock, Ed suddenly lifts his hand upward instead, and uses wind slash on the chandelier hanging from the ceiling, causing it to fall onto Taylor. And it causes Taylor to get pushed back, while students on the second floor panic after hearing the noise and wonder what is going on. Clebius also gets scared and questions what is happening outside. Taylor asks Elvira and Ayla if they are all right, and both of them are. And in the midst of all that, Ed's wind slash cuts a strand of Elvira's hair and slices the strap of her bag, shocking her. And all of her magical equipment and reagents fall onto the ground. Realizing that Ed is serious about this, she assumes that something is definitely going on upstairs. Elvira glances at her items and tries to reach for them. But suddenly, Ed uses his ignite spell, and everything becomes surrounded by flames. Elvira notes that this is quite bad, and that Ed is incredibly quick and precise. As she tells Zix that he should have warned her that Ed's magic skills weren't the only thing that was good. Elvira notes that as the top alchemy student, she is the strongest one on their side, but the biggest weakness of the alchemy department is that they barely have any combat skills without relying on magic items or reagents. Most alchemy students carry magic items in the form of rings or necklaces just in case, but she never expected a genius like herself to need something like that. And in shock, she realizes that Ed actually took all of that into consideration. She wonders if he deliberately made the chandelier fall, and then put up a wall of fire just to target her bag. But if that were the case, he could have simply targeted her instead, and besides, he is just Ed Roth Taylor. She then pulls a small ball out of her pocket, thinking that she still has something left, and it creates some kind of bunny. She imbues it with fire resistance and berserk mode, and then enhances it with even more strength, causing the bunny to grow huge and become far more ferocious. Ayla says that she can put out the fire using her magic, and tries to cast a water spell. But Ed easily counters it with his wind magic and attacks Ayla, leaving her too stunned to react. But Taylor arrives and slashes through Ed's magic, saving Ayla while telling her to get it together. Elvira notes that Ayla may be confident in her knowledge of magic, but when it comes to combat, she is still just an ordinary first-year student. And on top of that, Ed keeps targeting Ayla, making it impossible for them to get close to him, while neither Ayla nor Elvira can move much from their position. She then asks Taylor if he can take Ed down once he gets close enough. And meanwhile, she orders her bunny to attack Ed, sending it rushing toward him. And as it prepares to attack Ed, Taylor also gets ready to strike, saying that it isn't about whether he can do it, he has to do it. Elvira also throws on a cloak and rushes in, telling Taylor that she likes his spirit. And once she reaches her magic items, she quickly throws away the cloak and rubs herself against them like a pervert, saying how much she missed them. Meanwhile, Ed continues fighting the bunny, dodging its attacks while also aiming his own attack at Elvira, and sends a wind slash flying toward her. Elvira thinks that Ed seems to have prepared for all of this, and throws one of her magic items into the path of his attack, and tells Ed that he is too late. The blue bottle contains a special reagent made from chopped up night butterfly flowers and arrowroot mushrooms, imbued with a magic release spell. Its effect is to restrict the release of mana, and temporarily neutralize anything created through magic, as the flames quickly disappear. And we see that Ed has already killed the bunny, which drops lifelessly to the ground. Meanwhile, Elvira mentally asks Ed if he understands what everything she just did means, because he is now a mage who cannot use magic here. Seeing his expression, Elvira tells Ed to stop acting so nonchalant, since they have a fighter on their side, and shouts at Taylor to attack, with Taylor loudly calling Ed's name. But Taylor notices that Ed has started running, and Ed quickly turns around and pushes a huge cabinet toward Taylor, causing a container of liquid prepared by the maid to fall over as well. And once again, it creates a huge fire, with Taylor noting that it smells like oil, while Elvira calls it ridiculous, since they are inside Awfulest Hall, and people could get hurt if the fire spreads through the hallways. Taylor grips his sword tightly, saying that he can cut through any fire with his elemental slash, whether it is created by magic or spread through oil. And the reagent only lasts for a few minutes anyway, so before anyone gets hurt, Taylor decides to put an end to this. But suddenly, Elvira tries to stop Taylor and shouts at him to wait. She notices that the windows have been opened enough for the smoke to escape, and it also looks like the rugs and anything else flammable have been moved out of the way. And she realizes that even this was part of Ed's calculated plan, as Ed finally takes out his bow. Elvira once again shouts at Taylor to stop, while Ed prepares to fire. Taylor is surprised to see that Ed can use a bow, but thinks that he can block the attack, only to notice something at the last moment. As the arrow flies past him and heads toward Ayla instead, Taylor realizes that Ed wasn't aiming for him from the beginning. Ayla is shocked as well, as Taylor realizes that she cannot even use a basic defensive spell right now. He shouts her name in worry, but the arrow is suddenly stopped by something. And we see that it was Elvira, who used one of her magic items to stop it, noting that it was quite close. She used something called claw fingers, which allows the user to pull any small object toward themselves from any distance, as long as it remains within sight. But suddenly, Elvira notices that the arrow has a ball of barrack in place of its arrowhead and realizes that Ed was going easy on them. She once again tells Taylor to watch out, believing that Ed still has something up his sleeve. And we see Ed block Taylor's strike with his bow. Suddenly, a huge noise comes from the second floor, and it is Act 2 of the occupation of Awfulest Hall, as the second floor boss, Creepy Clevius, has escaped. And so, Ed relaxes and thinks that he can finally let go. And he stops defending himself, taking Taylor's strike head-on and getting sent flying. Elvira is completely shocked by his actions, wondering what the hell just happened. Taylor grabs Ed by the collar, calling the whole thing ridiculous and saying that there has to be a reason for him to go this far. Elvira is annoyed and hates the entire situation, because she feels like they have all been playing along exactly as Ed wanted them to throughout the entire fight. And if he had really intended to stop them, he would have ambushed them by dropping the chandelier without revealing himself. But instead, he simply sat there and waited for them. And throughout the fight, he showed no hesitation or lack of experience. So Elvira feels that something is definitely off, while Ed asks Taylor if he is done with this. And if he is, then he should stop yapping and get upstairs already. They are all stunned by this, with Taylor pointing out that Ed was fighting so hard to stop them, yet now he is telling them to go upstairs. Elvira steps forward and asks Ed why he went easy on them, while Ayla asks Elvira what she means, and Taylor is surprised to hear it as well. Elvira is in no mood to let the question go, and once again asks him why he went easy on them. And we see the two of them staring each other down. But suddenly, the gate opens. The persimmon flower clip was the one Janica chose after endlessly contemplating her options. No one could possibly mock her innocent devotion, because even if it was all a misunderstanding, she was free to imagine whatever she wanted. But the gap between those happy dreams and harsh reality can sometimes be cruel, as the boy she imagined appearing at the gazebo, dressed up nicely, was instead on his back, covered in blood after being ambushed by villains, and Ed notices her as well. And Janica's expression turns murderous as she asks them what they are doing. Janica felt that something was out of place, thinking that Ed might have gotten caught up in an unexpected situation. But knowing his simple lifestyle and remembering how he acted during the Glaskin incident, she believed that no matter how big or small the problem was, he would somehow find a way out of it. But after having that naive way of thinking about Ed shaken, Janica started reflecting on what she really thought about him. And despite telling him that she would help him no matter what, Ed had never once asked for her help. The reason he lured Janica outside the hall, even going as far as writing her a letter, and the reason he fought alone, was all to keep her away from the battlefield, especially since she had already received several punishments because of the Glaskin incident. And while Janica didn't know exactly what had happened, she realized that Ed had been considerate toward her, making sure she wouldn't get caught up in this. And while she had been busy worrying about how she looked, he had been fighting alone, which only made her even more pissed. And with an expression filled with deep anger, she asks them what they are doing. Taylor doesn't understand why she is so angry and tries to explain the current situation at Awfulest Hall instead. But Elvira tells Taylor to snap out of it, because Janica is their enemy right now. But Janica tells them that she isn't interested in whatever is going on. Ed shouts her name, trying to stop her, but she simply smiles and tells him that it's okay. Everyone else is left stunned and shocked by the scene unfolding right in front of them, as Janica summons countless spirits around her, fully prepared to destroy everyone who hurt Ed. She asks Ed to give her just 1 minute, saying that it will all be over. Elvira is sweating heavily after seeing Janica summon intermediate-grade spirits of all 4 elements, along with countless lower-ranking ones, practically forming a small army. So she tells Taylor that they need to get out of here, because there is no way they can get through Janica, especially after they already lost to the fallen noble. And now they are facing the top student among the second years of the entire faculty of magic. Janica begins attacking them, though they barely manage to dodge, while Elvira tries to convince Taylor to accept reality and run. And while Taylor doesn't disagree with her, Ed's actions have made him realize that something is wrong with this takeover of Awfulus Hall. And because there is a chance that students could get hurt, he raises his blade toward Janica. This action makes it clear that he is destined to live the life of a hero. But this time, Ed grabs him by the collar and drags him back, telling him that he should leave when Ed tells him to. This also causes Taylor to barely dodge an attack from one of Janica's spirits. Ed tells them that he will take care of Janica, so they should all head to the second floor as they originally planned. Ayla is confused by his actions, since he was stopping them before, but now wants them to move upstairs, and Ed simply replies that he changed his mind, so they should hurry. Elvira keeps being a pain, questioning how he plans to stop all those spirits while he is covered in scars like that. But he smacks her on the head while apologizing for tearing her back. And while she questions why Ed is ordering her around, she decides to do what he says for now. And they all quickly leave, leaving Ed alone with Janica. Janica still plans to attack them, but suddenly her eyes widen in surprise. As she sees Ed walking toward her, she tries to tell him to move aside, saying that she will handle the rest. He can explain everything later, but she wants to wrap this up first and get him treated. But Ed calmly calls out her name and raises his arm toward her, surprising her once again as he tells her that he is fine, so she should tone it down a little. And seeing Ed with his hands on her shoulders and standing so close to her causes her to blush heavily. She gets flustered and tries to point out that he has his hands on her shoulders, but Ed asks her to send the spirits away because he is barely able to stand. And she quickly realizes it herself as well, apologizing for her foolish actions. Everyone is shocked to see that Ed was actually able to stop her, as he signals for them to hurry and move on. And right afterward, he collapses to the ground, thinking that there isn't much time left, while Janica worriedly calls out his name. A little later, Janica scolds Ed for doing something dangerous again without telling her, but he replies that the situation didn't give him a chance, though he promises to tell her next time. She also thinks that the others went too far since they beat Ed up so badly, and while she isn't sure what happened, she plans to be angry with them the next time they meet. But regardless, she tells Ed to promise her that he won't get hurt like this again, and he thanks her for worrying about him. He starts to get up, thinking that although his plan went a little astray, he did his job as the first-floor boss and can now focus on his camp. But just then, Janica tells him that she saw a huge carriage while waiting at the rose garden, and although she couldn't see it clearly because it rushed past her, it was shaped like a golden crown. Ed immediately remembers that it is the symbol of the leader of the Elp Merchant Association, Lortel's adoptive father, and the man who killed her biological father, the fake boss who will disappear after losing to Lortel. In the final struggle of Act 2, the sages sealed Grimoire, Golden King Elt. But the fact that he came to the academy earlier than expected makes Ed realize that something is happening in the story beyond the scope of his knowledge. We see someone standing by a window in the hall, watching the carriage. And it turns out to be Lortel, who tells Alice that she was just dumped by that evil and mean-looking guy, Ed. Alice replies that she didn't think he was her type, and Lortel says that his looks aren't bad, but that's not what she meant, because she got the same feeling from him as she did from her. She tells Alice about the question she asked Ed and how he rejected her without mercy. And while glancing at Alice, she tells her that people like them get used to hearing things like that throughout their lives. Alice was the chief maid of Awfulus Hall, someone who had been working there for over 20 years, starting as an apprentice at the age of 15 and eventually proving herself capable of becoming the manager of Awfulus Hall. And this was where most of Lortel's investment had gone, as she tried to bend Alice away from her upright principles, with the losses from it burning a hole in the financial ledgers. But Lortel still didn't consider it a waste, telling Alice that she was lucky to have her by her side. She thought she had found someone of her own kind, someone who would abandon the rigid beliefs they had followed all their life for the sake of a few gold coins. And only by meeting people like that could she break free from her solitude. Probably because she had grown up in the ghettos of the slums and among merchants who risked their lives for a single gold coin, she had lived a life where if she didn't stab someone first, she would be the one getting stabbed. But regardless of the sad past that pushed her into this predicament, she was still an evil character, as she begins explaining her plans to destroy Awfulus Hall to Alice. She is clearly a hidden villain by the end of the story. Now, while walking along the hallway, she continues telling Alice about her further plans, but Alice simply sighs, telling Lortel that while they are on the subject, she wants to tell her something. Lortel, such a poor and pitiful human, despite her age, she has never truly loved anyone or had someone she could consider family, leaving her alone even in death, as Alice tells her that she isn't actually like her, while pointing a sword directly at her neck.